Delegations from both sides will discuss plans to release hostages and end fighting. Gaza photojournalist Motas Aziza is hoping for peace.
Israel is demanding security. They have the power. We don't have any power to face their power. They called and they asked for security, and the time that the whole world is waiting to establish peace, they keep killing Palestinians. So we are the one who need security.
The first funeral of a Manchester synagogue attack victim has heard the community struggle to come to terms with their deaths. The family of Melvin Kravitz, a 66-year-old who died after he helped to prevent the suspect from entering the building on Thursday, say he'd do anything to help people. 53-year-old Adrian Dorley is believed to have been accidentally shot dead by police. His actions were praised by one of the survivors, Alan Levy.
He would help anyone. A lovely, lovely, quiet, unassuming man. Adrian came out into the foyer. Adrian was holding one of those doors, and unfortunately, he's lost his life.
Ministers are promising to overhaul the housing market to save buyers money and prevent purchases falling through. They're proposing to force sellers to share more information up front and measures to help prevent chains collapsing. Jaguar Land Rover will restart some production this week, over a month after a cyber attack forced the car maker to shut down factories. Manufacturing will resume in Wolverhampton first. Russell Martin's been sacked after just 123 days in charge of Rangers. It follows a 1-1 draw with Falkirk in the Scottish Premiership, and which has begun a legal case that, if successful, could see UK smartphone owners each given nearly £20 back. The consumer group's accusing tech giant Qualcomm of overcharging Apple and Samsung. That's the latest. I'm Cam.
Welcome to the Home of Common Sense. Loads to talk about, I promise you that. Loads and loads and loads.
Yes, it's me again, your genial host, Kevin O'Sullivan.
How realistic do you think a ceasefire is this week?
There's a very good chance that we'll have a settlement, an agreement of some kind.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's 3 minutes past 6. It is Monday, the 6th of October, and it's very dark out there. A bit of a storm over the weekend. Storm Amy, which wreaked a bit of havoc in various parts of the country, mostly in Scotland, where there's a lot of people still without power. So hopefully you've got your clockwork radio out and you're listening to us on that, just like you normally do when the power goes out in Scotland. But the rest of the country, also a few trees down, a few railway trains disrupted, all the rest of it. A couple of airports shut down for a bit. But we return for the start of yet another roaring week, and of course an awful lot happened over the course of the weekend. Keir Starmer came out on Friday and pleaded, nay, begged the people who wanted to demonstrate on behalf of Palestine and a new Palestinian state, which has already been recognised by the Prime Minister, please don't go out and demonstrate, because it should be a time for mourning because of the terrorist attack that happened, of course, in Manchester on Thursday morning. Well, unfortunately for Keir Starmer, none of them paid any attention, none of them listened, and about 500 people were arrested, as a result of which it's put all sorts of cats amongst all sorts of pigeons inside the Labour government. It turns out that Shabana Mahmood, who is of course the Home Secretary, is now talking about getting new police powers to stop these marches from taking place. And while you might think that's quite a good idea when it comes to Palestine action, there are those who say, unfortunately, what it could mean is that you'll get bans on all sorts of protests, like, for example, the next time the UK marchers decide to have a big march to celebrate being British, that might get banned. Or a migrant hotel march might get banned. There's no real way of telling exactly which powers Shabana Mahmood wants to give and to whom. Jewish groups said that further powers were needed as the Times uncovered a series of events at universities which are going to mark the 2-year anniversary of the October the 7th Hamas attacks, and that will be, of course, tomorrow. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that. Also, of course, it means that Shabana Mahmood still has yet to work out exactly which police powers she wants to to give over. She said she couldn't stop the march last Saturday, when in fact it turns out that she probably could have. Suella Braverman tweeted about that. Meanwhile, of course, they're in more trouble, the Labour government, over a spy scandal. PM must come clean over China, say Tories. Sir Keir Starmer must come clean over the collapse of a China spy case. It emerged over the weekend that Jonathan Pole, one of the Prime Minister's closest allies, told a Whitehall meeting the government could not brand China as an enemy in court, which meant that the trial basically collapsed. That's also on the front page of the Daily Mail. The Prime Minister's security chief faces MPs grilling over China spy scandal. But the story that perhaps will grip most of you this morning is not about China, it's not about the Home Secretary, it's about a footballer called Gary Neville, who went out yesterday and decided to make a little short video of himself walking to work. And it's on the front page of the Daily Mirror. Gary Neville's plea, don't use our flag to divide us. Gary Neville thinks the problem in this country is all caused by angry middle-aged white men who know exactly what they're doing. Nothing to do with Islamists, nothing to do with knives, nothing to do with Islam. 0344 499 1000, 6 minutes past 6. Let's get it on. Rafe Heidelman-Kubitz here. Rafe, very good morning to you. Good to see you. I think we should start with Gary Neville, actually, this morning, because Gary Neville, I think, has rather certainly sort of set the heather alight with this rather ridiculous video that he made. I don't know if he made it yesterday. I spotted it yesterday on X for the first time. And the only paper that's really picked it up as a good story is the Daily Mirror. Everybody else seems to think the guy's a complete and utter moron by basically coming out and saying that, you know, our country is divided, and the reason our country is divided is, one, because of Brexit, two, because of white middle-aged men. Nothing to do with crazed Islamists going around with knives trying to stab people to death inside synagogues.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think he's desperate to take the crown from Gary Lineker as biggest plonker in Britain. I mean, this is a man with such luxury beliefs, right? Yeah. He lives in a rarefied golden cage. Yeah. He's got no reality of what life is like if you're living at the coalface of the dark side of diversity. Yes. Like those people who are actually the ones marching and saying and raise the flags. You know, that they are the backbone of Britain. They are the decent British folk, and they're tired of what they have to endure and what people like Gary Neville simply have no idea about.
Yes, I mean, he's basically saying, when I was driving to Salford City last night, no doubt in his luxury car, he said, I saw 50 or 60 Union Jack flags. On the way back, I went down the road to where the Jewish community is, and he says, we're all being turned on. We're all being turned on each other. The division that's being created is absurdly disgusting, mainly created by angry, middle-aged white men who know exactly what they're doing. He said, on one of my development sites, because he's a property entrepreneur as well, he's worth hundreds of millions of pounds, this guy, last night there was a Union Jack, and I took it down instantly. Yeah. I mean, you know, why?
This from the man, of course, who went to Qatar and was commentating, wasn't he, for the World Cup? He was. Trousering hundreds of thousands of pounds, saying, well, you know, I have to go there so I can make a statement. Well, as they said, have I got news from you? You can make a statement from home without going all the way over there. But look, the fact that Union flags are flying in the Jewish area of Manchester goes to show how closely the British people and the Jewish communities have felt for a long time. Of course. All those great marches you saw for the Jewish people in London, you saw the Israeli flag and you saw the British flag flying together. Right. I was in Northern Ireland. When I was in Belfast, wherever you saw the Irish flag, you had the Palestinian flag flying. That's right. When you were in loyalist areas, you saw the Israeli flag and the British flag flying. That's why they were flying in Manchester. It was in solidarity with the people who suffered those atrocities.
Exactly right. Let's have a look at one of the clips from this little video that he put out. This is the first one we'll show you.
I was driving home from Salford City last night. I was driving out to Salford City, going down a Littleton Road, seeing 60, probably 50 or 60 Union Jack flags. And I just kept thinking as I was driving home last night that we're all being turned on each other. And the division that's being created is absolutely disgusting. Mainly created by angry, middle-aged white men who know exactly what they're doing.
I suppose it doesn't strike him as ironic that he's actually a middle-aged white man himself.
Who knows exactly what he's doing as well.
Who knows exactly what he's doing, yeah. I find it incredible. He's basically saying that they've never flown Union Jacks before. Why are they doing it now? He says, I've been building in the city for 15 to 20 years. There's no one put up a Union Jack flag in the last 15 to 20 years, so why put one up now? I'll tell you why. Well, perhaps you can tell him why.
I'll tell you why, Mr. Neville. It's not being flown as a sign of aggression. It's being flown in sign of distress.
Yeah.
This is almost the last resort of the community, of the people of Britain, who feel that they've been betrayed by their political class, they've been betrayed by the media, they've been betrayed by people who should be speaking up for them, like Gary Neville, and they've taken it upon themselves. If no one else is going to stand up for us, we're going to have to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
We see our communities changing beyond all recognition. What more can we do? This is a symbol of distress, I would tell you.
I had a guest in here last week, I think it was on Thursday, a former Apprentice star, a Muslim woman who speaks out quite honestly about the Muslim community and how worried she is about it. And she admitted to me that there are Muslim ghettos now in this country, which we all know, but people don't really talk about, where you can't go as a non-Muslim person when English is not spoken, where, you know, English people are not welcome. You know, I'm afraid that is the reality, whether people like it or not, and that's why a lot of people feel that they should be flying British flags and English flags.
And it's been like this for a long time. Professor Ed Hussein wrote a book called Among the Mosques, where he identified these no-go zones where white men feel afraid to go there.
And white women certainly do.
And white women certainly, well, white women would never dream of going through those areas. And Professor David Betts from the Department of War Studies has also said that there are areas where the police have to ask permission from Muslim community leaders when they want to make a visit.
And we saw that during the riots from after Southport, didn't we, last year, where there were you know, Asian areas, Muslim areas, where the police didn't go, and they said quite openly to the community leaders in the mosque, well, we'll leave you guys to sort it out.
Yeah.
All right. Almost
and drop your weapons off at the mosque on your as well.
And don't worry about it.
And we know from all the evidence that these segregated communities are twice as likely to be extremists. The people that live there are twice as likely to be extremists as Muslims who live outside of this ghettoized community. And these ghettos act like petri dishes for the cultivation of abhorrent cultural practices that have no place in this country. Honour killings, acid attacks, of course you've got the Muslim rape gangs and so forth. These are the forced marriages, arranged child marriages, everything that happens in these places. Sharia law. These are essentially settlements trying to impose upon this country their own politics, their own traditions, their own way of life. It's completely anathema to Britain, and people can see their towns and communities changing beyond all recognition from the places that they grew up in. So it's no surprise that they're flying the Union flag.
Yeah. Well, let's have another look at Gary Neville. This is him describing how he's been taking down Union flags.
Funnily enough, on one of my development sites last week, there was a Union Jack flag put up, and I took it down instantly. And some people might be watching this and thinking, well, Gary, you're not very patriotic. I played my country 85 times. I love my country. I love Manchester and I love England. But I've been building in this city for 15, 20 years, and there's no one put a Union Jack flag up in the last 15 to 20 years, so why do you need to put one up now?
Probably because in the last 15 to 20 years, nobody put any Palestinian flags up either, but now you can't move for them.
Well, and also the British people and the English people have been told that they're far right and they're racist if they do these things, and that no longer works any longer. The English and the British have woken up, and they won't be told any longer that they're far right or racist for defending their country and celebrating their heritage, and that's what's changed. The changes you see that with the rise of reform is that we're no longer going to be lectured to by the media political class who got us into this mess.
And people like Gary Neville, who, you know, could buy a very, very large building and put a lot of migrants in it if he wanted to, and perhaps let them live there at his expense. Maybe he'd like to do that.
Yes.
What a good idea. Meanwhile, quite a lot of stories around about Jihad al-Shami. This is the guy, of course, who committed the murder at that mosque in Manchester. A couple of stories to mention. The Islamic terrorists, and we should go back to the silo of dangerous extremism that some of these people live in. The Islamic terrorist, according to the Mail, who murdered a Jewish worshipper at a synagogue, was a marijuana-smoking bigamist who had a tangled love life with several women. He was also on bail for rape when he went on the rampage at the Heaton Park synagogue on Thursday. The Syrian-born killer, who was reportedly a father of three, was married to two women at the same time, and was obsessed with messaging women on a Muslim dating site called Muzzmatch. which I've never heard of before, I must confess.
That surprises me.
More surprisingly, though, perhaps, and more worryingly, he was also apparently a follower of an extremist hate preacher who's from Kuwait, who's a firebrand cleric known as Sheikh Mishari Al-Fazi, I don't know if you know this guy, who made a string of racist and violence-stirring comments, including celebrating the October the 7th, 2023 atrocity. The thing that worries me is that this guy, one, has an account on X, right, which apparently Al-Shami was following, but he also came on a UK tour earlier this year, and he spoke in London, in Birmingham, and in Manchester, right? So obviously a crowd of very willing and sort of, you know, available supplicants who were willing to carry out murderous sprees on his behalf.
Yeah, and you've had...
What's he doing being allowed into the country?
Well, this is it. You've had a French professor concerned, a philosopher concerned about immigration in this country who was denied a visa, a harmless academic, and then you get preachers of hate like this who come over here with absolutely no issue whatsoever, and he's far from the only one doing that. And of course, at the same time, you're getting people put into prison for tweets that they've tweeted, which are, you know, or retweeted. And here you have direct incitements to hatred, outrageous anti-Semitism. Yes, you have the right to free speech. That doesn't mean you have the right to be given a visa to come to this country and preach your hatred. And
they've banned people before from coming to this country, haven't they?
This is the radicalisation that's happening in our mosques. You know, more than half of British mosques are now run by the Deobandis, who invite people like this. The Deobandis are the extremist cult that gave birth to the Taliban. And nothing is being done by this government or the previous government to tackle what is happening within these ghettos, within these mosques, and when people go to listen to people like this speak. And of course, this is not just that. These guys also have very prominent YouTube channels, but they also have satellite TV channels that are beamed into people's homes, particularly in these ghettos. They're not watching any British television. They're watching channels from Qatar and elsewhere that preach absolutely abhorrent anti-Semitism, but because it's not happening in the English language, for some reason the authorities do nothing about it.
Well, you would think, I would think anyway, it's a pretty easy win for the authorities and for Shabana Mahmood, who we'll hear from in a minute. If you want to kind of keep an eye on people who are doing bad things or might likely do bad things, maybe try and check who's following this character, you know, on Twitter. Sheikh Mishari Al-Afasi. I mean, if anybody in Britain is following his Twitter account, then I suggest you go round and knock on their door and go, excuse me, and let's have a look around and see what you're planning to do.
Yeah, and there's a broader history, because you've correctly highlighted the drug habit, the rape that was committed by this terrorist in Manchester. The number of these terrorists who have links to the criminal underworld or who have got criminal records or are violent and drug addicts, they're claiming to be good Muslims, and yet they are as far as you can get. There's a strong link between criminality and radical Islam.
Well, look at his father. You know, his father comes out, and his father, it turns out, this guy, Jihad, who presumably named him Jihad, came from Syria. He works in the NHS as a surgeon, I believe, and he's living in a council house, presumably provided by the local council in Manchester. He comes out initially and says, you know, we disown our son. This is a terrible thing that he's done. We would not encourage radical Islam, or we would not encourage anything like that. Then it turns out that somebody found a Facebook post that he'd made on October the 7th, celebrating the Hamas killings and the Hamas incursion into Israel, calling them men of God and calling them martyrs.
What a surprise!
I mean, how surprising
from someone who names their son Jihad. I mean, that would be like, you know, some sort of German naming their Nazi, making their son Mein Kampf or something like this. My struggle. It means exactly the same thing. It's absolute nonsense. And he's far from the only person. And what's going on with the NHS, where there are so many people? There's another in the papers today. There's a female doctor who's not being struck off, even though she has
the throat
she did a throat thing, and you know, how does all of this get away? Now, look, I'm all for free speech, but it's the two-tier justice, you know. You had that Labour councillor doing the same thing, yet Lucy Connolly went to prison. I mean, the whole thing just stinks to high heaven.
It really does. Here's Shabana Mahmood finally admitting that it might have something to do with Islamist ideology. Let's have a look.
The police very quickly did declare this to be a terrorist incident, and it is our view at the moment that that is extremist ideology, that he was an Islamist in that sense, but we don't know more yet about the circumstances either of his own planning of the terror attack or who else might have been involved.
Yeah, a few other people have been arrested as well. And in fact, she was doing the rounds on Friday morning saying there's only one person responsible for this, and that's the guy who we've shot dead. But it turns out maybe there was other people involved as well, so we remain to obviously see how that investigation goes. But let's just remind ourselves of Keir Starmer, who, of course, has been very quiet about this business, because Keir Starmer basically, I think Sadiq Khan and various others have put out things saying, put out social media tweets saying how awful it all is, without mentioning Islam, without mentioning, who it is that's terrifying the Jewish community, all coming together. We'll play the David Lammy clip in a minute as well. But this is Keir Starmer. Just remind ourselves of what he called those riots at Southport.
I won't shy away from calling it what it is: far-right thuggery. To those who feel targeted because of the colour of your skin or your faith, I know how frightening this must be. I want you to know that this violent mob do not represent our country, and we will bring them to justice.
Well, he does shy away from calling out anything from the far left's point of view, or indeed anything Islamic, because he doesn't mention that at all. Over the course, he hasn't tweeted, and this is unusual for him, since Saturday, where he said he urged anyone thinking about protesting this weekend to recognise and respect the grief of British Jews. He doesn't say why they should be grieving. He doesn't say why they should be in the midst of being caused pain. He doesn't say why there's further tension. He just doesn't say anything and doesn't mention it. And then he went up to Manchester on Friday to thank the first responders. Didn't mention what had happened. Hatred will never win. Doesn't say who the hatred belongs to. The vile terrorist attack that he mentions 3 days ago says people were attacked because they were Jews. Doesn't say who did the attacking. Doesn't call out the far left or indeed the Islamists for being responsible.
And I think this goes across the entire Labour Party. I don't think anybody apart from Mahmood, who just said Islamists there. The word Islam,
she blurted the word out with some pain.
She had no choice. Look, let's be clear here, right? People are keeping their heads in the sand about this.
Yeah.
There are over 43,000 people on the MI5 terror watch list. Yeah. Over 90% of them are jihadis, right? That's larger than the size of Hamas on October the 7th.
Right.
That's larger than the size of ISIS in 2014 when they invaded Iraq.
And that's just the people who are here.
Those are just the people who are here. But, yes, the majority of Muslims in this country are well-adjusted and integrated. That should be celebrated. But according to polling, at least 9% of Muslims identify as being Islamist extremists in this country.
Yeah.
This is a huge issue. The first duty of any government is to secure the safety and the security of the nation and its people. And we've got the government increasing defence spending to 2.5% or 5% of GDP to deal with external threats. What is it doing about the internal threats to this country, which I would argue are even greater than the external threats when you look at those numbers, which are only going to double in the next 25 years as the Muslim population increases? I think it's a complete dereliction of duty by Starmer and the Labour government not to even mention the word Islamism, not to mention they should be coming out with a plan of action as to how they're going to tackle this and prevent other things happening.
It's absolutely right. And one of the things that's happening as well, I'm getting lots of messages about Gary Neville this morning. Mick says Gary Neville should hand his England caps back by middle-aged white English, virtue signalling at its worst. Mick in Watford. And Quinn says, morning Mike, I've got the St George's flag flying on my house. There is no way I will take it down. I, like millions of others, want our country back. And that's Quinn in Rotherhithe. And one from Matthew. What a traitor to our flag Gary Neville is. Perhaps he wasn't complaining when he was being paid fortunes to play under it. This is the trouble, with these footballers. I mean, they often think because they've got a little bit more than the ability to string two words together, they're kind of, modern philosophers of our time. But it's a sort of one-eyed man in the land of the blind, isn't it? Clever for a footballer, but he's made a pretty stupid statement here. Here he is blaming Brexit for all of it. Check this out.
Brexit has had a devastating impact on this country, and the messaging is getting dangerous, extremely dangerous. All these idiots that are out there spreading hate speech in any form and abuse in any form, we must stop promoting them. We must stop elevating our voices towards them. And it needs to stop now and get back to a country of love, of peace, of harmony, and become a team again.
Yeah, of course, a lot of people complaining about his outburst, saying that they're going to boycott Sky Sports. To say to Sky Sports, is this really the person you want? Because at no point during his rant there does he mention, again, the Islamic terrorist, the guy who's caused the deaths of two people, because of course we know that one of them accidentally was shot by the police, but he wouldn't have been shot by the police if the terrorist wasn't trying to break into a mosque. So I don't think we can blame the police for that. This was firmly on the shoulders of this scumbag terrorist who was an Islamic fundamentalist.
And once again, all of his venom, all of his bile is targeted solely towards the white population who are basically don't share his political outlet.
Right.
He talks about hate speech. What about condemning the hate speech of the people on those Palestinian marches that we hear? What about condemning all the anti-Semitism coming from elements in the Muslim community? What about condemning the anti-Semitism from people on the far left of politics as well?
Yeah.
He's silent about all of those things. Again, just be even-handed. If you're going to go on one of these soapboxes, at least give the ammunition fairly to both sides of this. But also, why do we care what a man who's good with his feet? It doesn't mean he's good with his head necessarily, apart from heading a few too many footballs perhaps in his career.
Maybe that's
but the fact that we give platforms to these people who essentially they're only wealthy because of what they did on a Strictly Come Dancing or in a soap opera, and for some reason the nation has to listen to their nonsense.
Yeah, no, I know, quite right. I mean, the other thing that was fascinating was a piece by Matthew Said in the Sunday Times on Sunday. I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah.
He actually went down to the protest, the pro-Palestine Action protest, just as an interested observer, and walked around and started talking to people. And he said he couldn't believe the amount of bile, the amount of absolute ghastliness, anti-Semitism. In no way, shape or form was it peaceful. He was told to F off by these people that said he had an agenda, but simply because he asked the question, do you not think that Hamas bears some responsibility for the problems that are happening in Gaza right now? And so people were actually defending Hamas on this march. They're not simply calling for the end of the war. They are calling for the destruction of the Jewish state. That's what they want.
And if you watch the BBC and Sky News or you look at The Guardian, you'll see photographs of elderly people sitting there peacefully with placards, and that's the image they want to portray. Look, this could be your grandmother sitting there. I'm sorry, have a conversation in more than 30 seconds, and you will see a very different reality to what those people think, and also what the people who aren't being photographed behind the old people actually believe.
Exactly, and all these sort of silly old people who go limp and look as if, they're being dragged away by the terrible Stasi, that's not the reality of what's actually going on.
Well, and also remember, 30 years ago they weren't elderly. They were radicals in other marches, right? Just because they got grey hair doesn't mean they're any less odious than they were 30 years ago.
Exactly right. Here's the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood on what restrictions might be brought in on protests.
What I will be making explicit is that cumulative disruption, that is to say the frequency of particular protests in particular places, is in and of itself a reason for the police to be able to restrict and place conditions. That is to say they can move them to a different place, they can restrict the time that those protests can occur on. So that will unlock all of the broader measures that the police can already do on protests.
Now, the worry I would have about this is, while obviously after 2 years of every single weekend having a pro-Palestine protest, it's time for them to bring that to an end. I can see her using those exact same words and telling people they can't protest outside migrant hotels on the basis that it's in the same place, it's taking place too often, and it's causing distress to the people inside.
And that's the problem here. Once you start going down this road, it's a very dangerous path with unforeseen consequences. Look, we can fully understand why, with Just Stop Oil, with these weekly Palestinian marches completely disrupt, Jews don't feel safe going into the centre of town. I've got a lot of sympathy for it, and there may be some argument, maybe it has to be redirected down to different streets in London or whatever, but it's a very, very dangerous path to go down, and my fear is, you're hearing arguments, for example, that, well, the police should be able to decide if it's going to stretch their resources. Well, what's the test for that going to be? They could easily just say that on any occasion.
Yeah, right.
Oh, well, our resources are stretched.
We've got a lot of people taking the weekend off.
And the big test will be if there are two marches, one from the right, one from the left, which one are they actually going to decide is the one that has to be banned? And then again, how do you actually ban a march? All right, so you tell 500,000 people not to come out onto the streets. If they choose to come out, what are you going to do about it?
I think the problem here is that London has become this kind of ridiculous kind of performative space, and it has been even from before the time of October the 7th, during the whole kind of post-COVID era, shall we say, when you had Just Stop Oil, when you had, suddenly it was, I'm not here very often at the weekends, and there's good reason for it, because in the centre of London, there's always somebody bloody marching around. And you just think, it's not just an exhibition space. People actually do live here, people do have businesses here, but it's been allowed to turn into a kind of, an operation where everybody comes here to demonstrate. You know, I was in Oxford Street once a couple of years ago, and I came out of Bond Street Station, and there was this massive march going down Oxford Street, closed off all the street, and it turned out it was some, you know, little-known African republic where people were demonstrating about some kind of, you know, horrible injustice that was going on. It wasn't Congo, but something like that. And I'm going, why are they marching here? You know, why are they suddenly marching down Oxford Street?
Well, this is the other problem. Now that London's only 33% white British or whatever it is, you've got entire communities now living here of tens of thousands who want to have their own protests as well. I was stuck in one just a couple of years ago. It was Eat the Rich. It was some far-left organisation that blocked my path. I had a photograph taken with someone who wanted to get rid of the monarchy, which I thought was very funny. But
it has reached ridiculous proportions.
But then, of course, you add, I live in central London, you add in all the charity bike races, all of those charitable things, and all these marathons and so forth. Yeah, getting around central London is not easy on weekends.
No, it really isn't.
Naked bike rides as well.
Yeah, that should definitely ban that. That's absolutely a ghastly situation. Now, coming back, we'll play you some footage of David Lammy getting booed and John Swinney getting booed by Jewish audiences, both of whom deserved it richly, I would say. 6:29.
Now, Kemi has proudly announced that should they win power, they'll exit the ECHR. They will revoke the Climate Change Act. They will deport 150,000 people a year. Sorry, Kemi. Too little, too late. And anyway, it's not in the DNA of the modern Conservative Party to be conservative anymore. And even if Kemi were to become Prime Minister, and I'll be honest, it's more likely that Elton John's natural hair growth will return before that happens.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 6:33. I'm Mike Graham. Rafe Harderman-Koo here with us as well. We've got lots to talk about this morning. Gary Neville blaming angry middle-aged white men for pretty much everything that's wrong with Britain. And, of course, Brexit. Nan in Wales says, do you think Gary Neville is talking about those middle-aged white men that buy Sky Sports subscriptions, or those middle-aged white men that paid his wages as a footballer, bought tickets to watch him play, bought his football shirts? Those middle-aged white men, is that who he means? It's a very good point, because largely football crowds tend to be made up of quite a lot of middle-aged white men. Morning, Mike and Rafe. Gary Neville was in Labour Party political broadcast pre-election and also popped up in Davos earlier this year. How quickly he's forgotten his working-class roots, says Jules. Yeah, you imagine Gary Neville kicking the ball about, sort of Davos five-a-side. You know, I wonder who'd have in his team.
I wonder how many attended his conference if he was speaking there. Can you imagine?
But it is pathetic,
worse attended than the Tory party conference,
yeah.
I imagine.
I mean, I'm not sure anything's worse attended than that. We've got Mel Stride coming up later on. He's obviously going to fight his way through the crowds to get to a camera so he can talk to us. Starmer will end up banning patriotic British marches, guaranteed, says Tony. You can see this writing on the wall. I think there's a lot to be said for that, because I think you can tell, because we know what Labour are like. We know where their true, sort of loyalty lies. Their true loyalty does not lie to the people putting British flags up. Their true loyalty lies with those communities, as you said before, which are sort of running themselves without any interference from white middle-aged men.
Well, and they know full well so many of the front bench of the Labour Party's seats require them to basically kowtow and bend over backwards to appease and placate those very communities.
Yes.
I mean, people like... That's why Jess Phillips, the Minister for Safeguarding Women, has never condemned any of the misogyny or the sexual aggression that emanates within those communities. Could it be because she depends upon votes in that community?
Yeah.
I'll let the viewers decide.
And funnily enough, Nick Timothy was tweeting over the weekend, the MP, a Tory MP, because he wrote a letter to Jess Phillips asking for the involvement now of the National Crime Agency in looking into not just the grooming gangs and the rape gangs in the north of England, but the complicity by the police, the complicity by certain council officials, which is now, as far as he's concerned, a sort of a criminal conspiracy. And she, of course, wrote him a letter back saying there's no need to involve the National Crime Agency because they've already been co-opted into the investigation. So she specifically doesn't want that to happen.
Well, I don't think enough people know. There was a very good chap called Roger Meir who's been a whistleblower about this, about how much the Labour Party in the north of England has been working hand in glove with some of these characters, these nasty characters, to essentially secure postal votes. You've had gangs of Muslims going door to door to communities where they can't speak English, saying, just give us your postal votes, often with a heavy there to make sure they do.
Just put it
and
in
then
the sack.
tranches of they just sign them postal votes, and tranches of these are then going over to the Labour Party. This is the rotten borough politics we thought we got rid of in 1832 with the Reform Act.
Yeah, but they brought it in from Pakistan now.
Yeah, there's the politics of Pakistan have been introduced into this country. There needs to be an inquiry about that. And what I find amazing is that this is not front-page story. I
know.
We have not just gerrymandering,
because
we have corruption in politics.
People want to shy away from it. They don't want to talk about it because it's, as they call it difficult. It's a difficult conversation. It's not difficult.
It's not difficult at all.
Just talk about the facts,
It's
right?
a crime.
Well, I'll tell you what is difficult. David Lammy, I don't know what idiot came up with the idea of sending him to Manchester to speak to Jewish community leaders and members of the Jewish community after that murderous rampage by Jihad, the terrorist killer. Here he is at a Manchester vigil on Friday.
I have great pleasure in introducing our Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, and before I do, please, 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 we know how we all feel. We know how we all feel.
On the street. My children's school was closed today. You have allowed this to happen. David Lammy, you have allowed this to happen. You are all guilty of it all. You have allowed Jew hatred in Manchester on the street. You have allowed it. You are all guilty. We do not want you speaking here today. Do not speak. You defeated. Shame on you. 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 Shame on you.
And after that, they managed to quieten down the crowd, and he started. You know how he started his speech? Friends. And you just go, I mean, how completely tone deaf can you be? I mean, even if it says that on your little bit of paper, you might actually start by saying, look, I appreciate how you feel. Exactly. I'm terribly sorry. I'm here to represent the government. You may not like some of the things I've done in the past, but I'm here to show solidarity. Something like that. But not just read off a script and go, friends.
Whatsoever. And bravo to those people for calling out somebody who clearly is two-faced and disingenuous, because you cannot have made your career up to this point from attacking Israel, from doing all the things that he said, and then suddenly expect people to believe that you've changed your view on all of this. People know what he truly believes. And this is a wounded community. This is a community that's grieving. And the audacity of the Labour Party to send out someone like this to speak to them, I think, naturally sticks in their craw.
Yeah, absolutely right. He wasn't the only one. I think we just got a quick clip from John Swinney. He's up in Scotland, of course, leader of the SNP, First Minister at Holyrood.
Recognition of a Palestinian state, because I think it is the because I believe it. Because I believe it to be the necessary route to securing peace in the Middle East.
There's a time and a place for these conversations, not on a vigil to mark the second anniversary of the greatest attack in the history of Israel on its people. That shows the fact that they live in these echo chambers where they've never been heckled for saying that sort of stuff. And there they are actually meeting people who are calling them out for once. And we need to see more of this sort of public shaming.
Definitely. And of course, you know, again, calling for the, you know, the establishment of a Palestinian state 24 hours after somebody who also wants that has murdered some Jewish people. You know, it just doesn't make any sense at all. At 6:39, coming up, we'll talk some more about some of the other stories that are doing the rounds, of course, as well. Cyclists injuring a record number of pedestrians, it might not surprise you to know. Also, the BBC is banning the words mate and sweetheart. Also, we'll tell you why Keir Starmer's off to India and his latest poll rating, which is even more bad news for the Prime Minister. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:42. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Mel Stride coming up in a little while from Tory Party Conference, which is going on up in Manchester without terribly much ado, it has to be said. Keir Starmer, meanwhile, is going to go to India, Rafe, on Tuesday to meet Prime Minister Modi. It says here he's going to reaffirm the shared vision of India and the UK.
Well, isn't it funny that he always tends to fly off somewhere when things are getting hot?
Yes.
Here, it's worse than sort of throwing a dead cat just to see him
really
fly over somewhere else. We also know that actually it's with foreign leaders that he's the most popular.
No.
We know that he gets on very well with Trump. So he's very keen, it seems to me, to be seen with other world leaders who are more popular than he is, to try to get some of that glow.
Right.
But you can only do that for so long. He also tends to go when the weather's not getting very good in this country as well.
It's so transparent. People just see through it. It also comes at a time when JLP Partners have put out a new poll just yesterday, 6,000 British adults, and it was 26th September to 3rd of October, so it covers pretty much the period of Labour Party conference, right? And it says, of the following, who do you think would make the better Prime Minister? And I'm afraid Nigel Farage is now leading it. 35% Nigel Farage, 34% Keir Starmer, 31% don't know. This contrasts with back in March, Starmer had a 10-point lead at 43% against Nigel Farage's 33%. So he's lost effectively a 10-point lead.
Yeah, and this was the last poll that showed Labour in a good light. So everything else they were failing, but in terms of being Prime Minister, Starmer had a slight lead. That's completely gone. Just goes to show that reform is unstoppable, because there's another poll out showing that even if the Tories replace Kemi Badenoch, any of her replacements, including Robert Jenrick, would fare worse against Farage than even Kemi Badenoch herself.
Yeah, I mean, Tory party conference is not looking terribly like a good place to be at the moment, even if you're a leader of the Tory party, because there's just nobody. And I saw that Kemi Badenoch's speech yesterday, she was making it in front of a sort of a new slogan about strengthening borders, and you just think, you're having a laugh.
Well, the thing is now, the Tory party is now in the same territory as the Lib Dems and the Green Party. They can say whatever they want to. They can make any promises they want to, because nothing's ever going to happen with any of it. It's the centenary of Margaret Thatcher this week, actually. And that just goes to show you how great the fall of the Tory party has been. But they've got a big exhibition at the Tory party conference with some of her dresses, and I think there are more dresses of Margaret Thatcher than there are people attending the conference, actually.
I think that is the problem, isn't it? Absolutely dreadful. A couple of stories to mention. One in the Sun today. The BBC has banned the words mate and sweetheart. Probably not surprising. Page 13, I think it is. Yeah, apparently the BBC is banning its big name stars from using terms of endearment such as mate, sweetheart and silver fox in an apparent crackdown on free speech. Freelancers must fill in passports which warn against microaggressions, such as comments on people's accents or remarking on curly hair.
Well, I have a habit of calling everyone my dear, or calling ladies my dear, so I think maybe that's why I don't go on the BBC as often.
That would be one reason, yeah. It could be another reason.
Really? What would that be?
I don't agree with you. I mean, you can't be going on there. They don't like what you're saying.
No, but you know what? It's when you go to a place, especially if you're an outsider, you're coming into a TV studio, it puts you at your ease if someone is calling you dear or sweetheart in the makeup department or just the staff around there. I always find it very endearing. And it's also uniquely British. I know when foreigners come over here, they love the fact people are calling them sweetheart or dear. It's part of the character of this country.
Exactly right.
Especially London.
And to tell people, because it was only recently, wasn't it? It was only last year with Sadiq Khan. They did that ridiculous thing about if your friends are being misogynistic, you go, mate. Do you remember that? Mate, what you doing, mate? I presume they'll have to can that now.
Where all the misogynists were young white men and they'll be told off by ethnic minorities.
Yeah, exactly right. Mate, don't say that. The other one I like is on page 25 of The Sun. A number of OAPs admitted to hospital for snorting cocaine has soared by a third in 2 years. Several people in their 90s apparently being admitted. I mean, there's obviously plenty more life in the old dog yet, as they say.
Well, they don't make them like they used to, because I think drug use has gone down amongst teenagers, and how we know where it's going is going to other people's pensions.
It's like that film Little Miss Sunshine. Do you remember where the grandfather was snorting cocaine in the back of the family car as they were sort of driving across the Midwest, and he eventually had a heart attack and died? Quite a funny movie.
Is that dandruff, Grandad? No, it's not.
No, it really isn't. And finally, I think we've got the pictures of James Bond. They've reworked James Bond. So apparently all of the posters for old James Bond films, which normally show people like Sean Connery, Pierce Brosnan, and even Daniel Craig with guns in various ways, shape or form, they've airbrushed the pictures to take the guns out.
It's the man.
So James Bond. It's a man with no.
The man with a missing gun.
Yeah, there it is. See, there's the first one with GoldenEye, holding a big gun with a bit of a silencer on the end. Pierce Brosnan. Dr. No Gun. Dr. No Gun. They could call that. What's going on?
But the crazy thing is the 007 logo is a gun itself, and they've kept the logo in as well. The thing is completely stupid.
This is the thing, isn't it? This is why these revamps never work, because it just looks idiotic.
Well, what do you expect you're going to get when you watch a James Bond film?
I mean, he's got a license to kill. What's he going to kill
If you don't
with?
like guns, you might click on that, watch the film, and then you have a heart attack.
Yeah, be really shocked. And license to kill. So what are they going to change the phraseology as well? License to slightly injure? Or license to make it a citizen's arrest?
Dr. No Guns, as we have there.
Dr. No Gun is very good, yeah. Gold. Oh, it's just mad, isn't it? Ridiculous. Anyway, listen, Rafe, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. It's a good start to the week. There's plenty to get your teeth into, plenty to get stuck into. Coming up, we're going to speak to Mel Stride, who's up at Labour Conservative Party conference in Manchester. Rafe, thanks very much again. We'll see you soon. This, of course, is Morning Glory. Back after this.
.37% of Pakistanis in this country have first cousin marriage, compared to 1% everywhere else.
Right.
They only account for 3% of births in this country, but they account for 33% of birth defects.
Yeah, and that costs the NHS money dealing with all these
defects. Appointments, huge burden.
They all go on
PIP,
and they basically have to get money from the state for life.
And why on earth do we still allow first cousin marriage? You know, it should be banned outright. We don't.
Yeah. Well, when that story broke, the public, they did a poll. When that story broke, the public thought it was illegal already.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:51. Having said goodbye to Rafe, he's still here, so I'll have to say goodbye to you again in a minute. We're just waiting for Mel Stride to come to fruition. Let's get a quick voice note from Mark on Gary Neville.
Well, it's difficult to describe how I feel about Gary Neville without using an expletive, so I'm not going to even bother to try, to be honest, because I'd just end up swearing. But in my opinion, when he says he's patriotic because he played for England, then that is a total lie. You go online and look at the old videos of the starts of England games when the national anthem was sung, and you try and find a video of Gary Neville belting out the national anthem. There isn't one. When he says these Union Jacks and angry white men are hateful, what it is, it's fear on his part, because he can see this far-left communist ideology of theirs totally collapsing. They want to destroy the fabric of Britain, destroy our industry, destroy our social fabric and our communities, and replace us with other more dangerous things. They're absolutely lunatics. They're evil lunatics, and we need to get rid of them.
couple of other people have also pointed out, Rafe, that when he was in the England football team, he led a players' revolt at one point against the manager and therefore against, presumably, the flag of the nation and his patriotism. Because who in their right mind, if you're playing for your country, leads a kind of a strike against it?
I think the paycheck was far more of a pull factor than any patriotic interest in playing for England.
Yeah, I think so. A couple of other stories to mention. You might have an interest in this one just because of your affinity with stories about Angela Merkel and Ukraine. Angela Merkel, this is a story on Mail Online, says Poland and the Baltic states are responsible for Putin's war in Ukraine. Now, this is an interesting one because she's basically saying that she said that during the time Poland refused to support the Minsk Agreement, a pair of key international agreements between Russia and the EU, because they didn't do that, it emboldened Putin to properly invade Ukraine in 2022. Is what she's saying. So it's interesting because lots of people have blamed Angela Merkel for approaching the Ukraine for membership of the EU as one of the reasons why Putin sort of got his gander up. So she's now sort of saying that the first Minsk agreement brought about calm between 2015 and 21 and gave Ukraine, which had been defeated by Russia during a summer counter-offensive in 2015, that seemed to take back its land, time to gather strength and become a different country.
What a lot of nonsense. She needs to fade into the wilderness now.
Does.
You know, at one point she was the untouchable leader of Europe.
I know.
And she's basically come completely unstuck. Remember,
what a fall from grace.
It was German euros that were funding Russia through their oil pipeline.
Yeah.
Remember this, of course. And Trump warned them. He went to the United Nations and he warned the Germans, and they laughed at him when he said you are too dependent. And of course that completely hampered the initial outset of the Ukrainian war, any ability to put sanctions onto Russia. And why did she do that? Because there was a tsunami in Japan that knocked out a nuclear power station. Germany's not known for tsunamis, being virtually almost completely landlocked. And she got rid of the entire nuclear program in Germany because of this stupid threat from tsunamis. Let alone, let's not forget, 2015, she let in 1 million Syrian refugees into Germany, which was the precursor of what we've seen.
The beginning of the end.
That sent out a signal to the rest of the world that Europe is an easy touch and you can come there.
It may well be that we can draw a line and draw a connection between this guy, Jihadi, who committed murders in Manchester. His father was brought from Syria all those years ago because it was around about, I think, 2015 when this guy got British citizenship as a young man. Or, sorry, 2006. So it would have been around about that time when Angela Merkel was importing all of these Syrians into Europe.
Look, the title of worst German leader of the 20th century, I think, has been taken. Worst German leader of the 21st century, I think, falls upon Angela Merkel.
I think so. And the country still hasn't ever recovered. You know, I mean, they've been in sort of free fall, really, ever since.
They're in recession as we speak.
Absolutely right. And they still don't know what they're going to get their energy from. Final one, we should have talked about this, I suppose, a bit earlier. This is this Chinese spy scandal, which is on the front page of the Mail and the Daily Telegraph. It looks as though, once again, Jonathan Pole, who is, of course, one of the apparatchiks that came after the Tony Blair government, a very, very key player in foreign affairs during Tony Blair's time. He's now one of the Prime Minister's closest allies. He's the guy responsible, by the way, for selling off the Chagos Islands. He was the guy that went and did all the negotiating. He's now being told he may have to come and face a parliamentary inquiry and a parliamentary committee to answer questions about why this whole case has been dropped.
Yeah, this is a huge scandal. This is about two people in politics, two young men in Parliament who essentially were alleged to have been supplying China with evidence, which is alleged to have gone to the 5th most important person in China. And because Powell apparently said that China is not an enemy, that meant the case fell through because there's a breach of the Official Secrets Act or whatever. It has to be an enemy of the state, despite the fact that the Director General of MI5 essentially said that in 2023 that China was an enemy because 20,000 people in the UK have been approached by China to be covert spies. I mean, China is threatening Chinese dissidents in this country with threats of doing stuff to their family. They are doing unbelievable intellectual properties and espionage to steal our secrets and our research. In what way are they not an enemy of this country? Look at their Belt and Road Initiative and so forth. And I think Jonathan Powell has questions to answer. The Speaker of the House of Commons is absolutely outraged by this. He's even remarkably raised the prospect of having a private prosecution. That's the Speaker of the House of Commons. And look, Jonathan Powell was Tony Blair's right-hand man for the entire time, from being leader of the opposition to leaving politics. All over Iraq, all over Afghanistan was Jonathan Powell. He's also, of course, as you said, the person who has been involved in the deal to give back the Chagos Islands, and he was in favour of Peter Mandelson becoming the American. This man, I think, is an insidious force in Parliament.
They're all in it together. And also, we've now got a situation where the Chinese want to build this super mega embassy without telling anybody what's going to be inside it, in Tower Hamlets, of all places. And we're also told that if you've got a Chinese electric car, you're not allowed to park it anywhere near a Department of Defence facility because it's basically a giant spying machine. And you're kind of going, and so, it now looks as though the CPS have been leaned on yet again by the government, who are not supposed to be political, right, telling them not to go ahead with this case.
Yeah, because Angela Rayner has been kowtowing to them again in this pursuit for growth. She seems to be willing to put, the Labour Party seems to be basically willing to put our security at risk. That's how it seems to us. That's how it seems to the Americans as well, of course, who will be very upset about this.
No, exactly right. I think we are now finally able to say goodbye properly, so thank you very much indeed for saying. We'll keep Mel Stride until after the news. He's running a little bit late. Jeff in Aberdeenshire says, Gary Neville ought to get back in his box. These footballers should have learnt by now we don't care what they think. We cared about their abilities as a footballer, not their sparse intellect. Well, indeed, and the fact that this guy now owns a property empire and is worth hundreds of millions of pounds is not impressing anybody at all. Morning, Mike. I'm sick of these Labour morons slagging us off at every opportunity. Starmer says far-right thuggery, and I will call it out for what it is. Well, I'm calling out far-left, violent, nasty, evil, pro-Pally Islamist extremism, says Graham in Wrexham. They are the problem in this country. They are causing division, and they are the dangerous thugs we want off our streets. Get it right, Starmer. It's your lot that need the full force of the law. Throw the bleeding book at them, just like you did with the far right, as he calls it. Yeah, people are pretty angry this morning, as you might expect. Coming up in the next hour, Sarah Pochin's going to be here from Reform UK. Also, of course, Mel Stride. We'll ask him about this Chinese debacle, and Ian Duncan Smith is going to be with us a little bit later on in the show as well. Don't forget to keep your messages coming in, 0344 499 1000. We'll be back with you after the news.
Do you think it's a racist policy?
Well, I do think it is a racist policy. I do think it's immoral. It needs to be called out for what it is.
According to Keir Starmer, if you think young men that illegally cross the English Channel should be detained and deported, you're racist. In fact, if you even criticise any element of the immigration policies of the last two governments, you're racist. And yet the Home Secretary, Shubham Mahmood, tries to copy our policies.
Patriotism, a force for good, is turning into something smaller, something more like ethno-nationalism, which struggles to accept that someone who looks like me and has a faith like mine can truly be English or British.
Britain is being invaded. Thousands of fighting-age men from countries that despise Britain continue to arrive on our beaches. Our plan is the only appropriate response to a national security emergency. Immediate removal. Deportation is the ultimate deterrent.
Our flags, flying proudly as we celebrate difference and oppose racism.
Labour says these policies are racist and immoral, and by implication, Reform supporters, Reform voters, Reform sympathisers are racist too. Yes, if you think we should control our borders, you are, by the definition of the Prime Minister and his cabinet, all racists.
We can all see that the country faces a choice, a defining choice. Britain stands at a fork in the road. We can choose decency, or we can choose division, renewal or decline.
To accuse countless millions of being racist is a very, very low blow. Why? Well, this language will incite and encourage the radical left. I'm thinking of Antifa and other organisations like that. It directly threatens the safety of our elected officials and our campaigners. And frankly, in the wake of the Charlie Kirk murder, I think this is an absolute disgrace.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to 3 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham. We are here, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. We've been talking about Gary Neville and his comments about angry white middle-aged men pretty much all the way through the show. He's on the front page of the Daily Mirror and all over the papers, generally speaking, as well, for his rather what you might call intemperate rant about where Britain is and why it's in so much trouble. We'll speak to Sarah Potion as well, Reform UK MP for Runcorn and Helsby, very shortly. First, though, straight up to Tory Party conference. Mel Stride MP and Shadow Chancellor is with us. Mel, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to see you. Protest in Manchester, protest in London, protests all over the place. Now Shabana Mahmood's talking about clamping down on protests, but I'm slightly concerned that she might decide to start clamping down on all kinds of protests.
Well, obviously, we need to look very carefully at the proposals that the Justice Secretary, Home Secretary is making. But look, Mike, we've ended up in a position where these marches have been a source of a great deal of hatred. We have ended up in a position where many Jewish people in particular and Jewish communities have become extremely fearful, and they've been fearful indeed for some time in our country, and that just isn't right. So there is no doubt that the government needs to take further actions. We do need to look at the detail of what is being proposed here exactly, and as you're suggesting, obviously make sure that the exercise of those new powers is appropriate. But we do need to do something about a situation which really is deeply unsatisfactory.
Yeah, and it's causing all manner of different problems up and down the country, not least that terrible event up in Manchester last week on Thursday, where a crazed Islamist terrorist was able to, thankfully not able to get inside of a synagogue, but was able to get through the gates of a synagogue and just start stabbing people because they were Jewish. You know, what has happened to this country?
Well, I think we've arrived at a very, very sad moment when something like that happens. And it is bred of a generalised feeling in certain quarters that's being expressed often in these marches, which is stoking things up to the extent that appalling individuals do things like that. And that's why it's important that the government does get a grip of this and looks at these marches and looks at whether they're always appropriate. But as I say, we will want to look at the Home Secretary's proposals very carefully. These measures will have to go through Parliament, so there will be an opportunity to debate them then. But we certainly need to move to a point where these marches are not in and of themselves actually fueling problems, including the kind of problem that you have just touched on there, Mike.
You're speaking today at Tory Party conference. You're going to promise £47 billion in savings, cuts to welfare, cuts to foreign aid. Is anyone listening, though, I suppose, is the question, Mel?
Well, I think it's important that we are very clear as a party as to what we stand for. And people have been saying to date, well, we need to see the policies. I don't think anybody by the end of this conference will be able to say they don't know what the Conservative Party stands for. We're talking a great deal here about issues around stopping small boats and illegal migration, and Kemi has made a very important announcement about withdrawal from the ECHR, for example, but also the economy. We are a country that has been living beyond its means, and we have a Labour Party that is in denial on that and borrowing and spending and taxing like there's no tomorrow, and we've got a Reform Party which is peddling fantasy economics, promising everybody everything they want to hear but not really coming up with any clear plan as to how they're going to deliver or pay for it. And we've got to be the grown-ups in the room. So what I'm going to be saying today in my speech is that we do need to get a grip of debt and the servicing costs on that debt, and that means getting a grip on government spending, and that then allows us in turn to make the kind of choices around things like tax, particularly around tax and business and growth, that can get the economy moving. But we can no longer continue in the way we are, living beyond our means, because I'm afraid that will end up in a very dark place if we do.
Well, do you know, the Labour government said they were going to be the grown-ups in the room, so maybe you might want to come up with a slightly different slogan, because it obviously doesn't work for them. One final one for you, Mel. People are showing me the cover of the new programme for the Tory Party conference, and there's a whole collection of your colleagues on there, sort of senior shadow cabinet ministers. Apparently you are not there. Why is that? Did you miss the boat?
Well, that was that was because when that photograph was taken, and I believe it was pre-arranged at a particular time, I was in the United States. Actually, I was in Nashville, and the person I was meeting was Arthur Laffer, who, as you will probably know, is the man who is all about lower taxes, and I was discussing with him how we get taxes down and the importance of doing that to growth and getting a lower tax economy. And I think that was probably more important than being on the front page of a brochure.
Indeed. All right. Well, I'm sure she'll make it up to you over the course of the next couple of days. But, Mel, thank you very much indeed. Good to see you. Mel Stride MP, Shadow Chancellor at Tory Party Conference, which some people are saying isn't very well attended. It's certainly not as well attended as the Reform Conference, which I was actually at, which was great fun, full of people who actually wanted to be there. Sarah Pochin's here with us. Sarah, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. How you doing?
Yeah, very well. Good to see you. Mel Stride says he wants to be one of the grown-ups in the room. He says that the Reform Party have got fantasy economics. I always find it amusing to hear people who have completely wrecked the finances of the country talking about other parties with fantasy economics.
You know, I know. And have you noticed the insults that both the Tories and the Labour Party now are throwing our way, talking about we're creating policies on the back of a fag packet, we're creating policies down the pub. Yeah. I've heard so much of this over the last few days, and yet they are both copying reform policies, so they can't be that bad, can they? And how Mel Stride can sit there, I've just listened to him, and say we're talking fantasy economics when he's suddenly coming out with, oh yes, we're going to cut millions from the waste that is the welfare state and the waste that is, the civil service. Well, that's exactly what Reform are doing with their Doge unit, with Zia Youssef heading that up, and there they are accusing us of back of the fag packet economics.
Yeah, I mean, we've got Kerry Badenoch saying they're going to deport 150,000 people a year. Where have I heard that before?
Well, big wow as well, because let's face it, we've got hundreds and hundreds of thousands coming in. We think that there's well over 1 million people here currently illegally in the UK. We've got all the issues coming up next year from January 2026 with the Boris wave and the indefinite leave to remain. I mean, really, 150,000 a year. Well, good luck with that, Kemi. But one, that's the tip of the iceberg. And again, as I said earlier, suddenly the Tories are going to leave the ECHR. Oh, well, are they? Why did they spend 14 years? Why did they waste 14 years when we could have got on and done that? And also, they're talking about just putting on hold the Human Rights Act as opposed to reform, which is saying we will completely repeal the Human Rights Act. So, I don't think anybody is buying all of this rhetoric. All the Tories are doing at their very poorly attended conference, it looks like a ghost town, the pictures I've seen, are literally spouting out reform policies, as are Labour. And we know why, don't we? Because only reform are speaking to the people, are reflecting the views in the country at the moment of the people. And it doesn't matter what we talk about, Mike. We can talk about the protests and this new clamping down on protests. But the British people suspect, as do I, as I'm sure many of your viewers do, that they will be clamping down on the protests, the pro-Jewish protests, or my veterans that I'm always supporting in Parliament Square that protest regularly. Oh, I bet they'll all be cleared out, but will we see the Palestinian protests cleared out? Well, let's wait and see, Mike.
Well, my worry as well is that they'll because what the language that Shabana Mahmood is using about places where protests go on continually, that sounds to me like migrant hotels. Places where people might be caused distress. Well, again, that sounds like migrant hotels, because you can bet your bottom dollar that they would like to stop those protests.
Absolutely, and these protests are fundamentally peaceful, you know, the pink t-shirted mums and, you know, really concerned about the safety of their children. These are peaceful protests. Are they going to stop those protests? Because this is a democratic country. And one of the things I always speak about when I get the chance is that we have to fight for our democracy. And this government, I think, is determined to limit the powers of democracy. There's a big difference between a peaceful protest that has always been the right of people in this country and these violent, insightful protests that we're seeing now from pro-Palestine. There's a big difference. One, in my view, is a criminal offence, these pro-Palestine inciting to violence. The other is a democratic right to peacefully protest.
Exactly. Let's have a look at the wording, actually, that Shabana Mahmood uses. This is from yesterday.
What I will be making explicit is that cumulative disruption, that is to say the frequency of particular protests in particular places, is in and of itself a reason for the police to be able to restrict and place conditions. That is to say they can move them to a different place, they can restrict the time that those protests can occur on. So that will unlock all of the broader measures that the police can already do on protests.
So you can see there's quite a few clues, aren't there, as to where she wants to take this, you know?
Absolutely. This is going to try and hit the people that are wanting to just speak the truth about what's going on in the country. This is going to be aimed at your core, decent, hard-working British taxpayer that is just upset about the state of this country. We know where that rhetoric is taking us, don't we? And like I say, I worry for the peaceful right to protest. That is what this country is all about. But we know in other ways they're starting to clamp down on our free speech. They're talking about bringing in the Islamophobia law. We've already had the battle and the debates over the so-called Online Child Safety Act, which does nothing other than, in my view, limit our freedom of speech. So, you know, and then we've got the ID cards coming in, although potentially I think they might be backtracking on those, don't you, as well? But all of these things attempting to control the will of the British people.
Exactly right. Talking about the will of the British people, the will of the British people on my show this morning is to call Gary Neville an absolute plank and a complete moron for what he came out with yesterday. Have a look at this. He's blaming angry middle-aged white men for everything, apparently.
I was driving home from Salford City last night. I was driving out to Salford City, going down a Littleton Road, seeing 60, probably 50 or 60 Union Jack flags. And I just kept thinking as I was driving home last night that we're all being turned on each other, and the division that's being created is absolutely disgusting. Mainly created by angry, middle-aged white men who know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. He also says at some point it's all down to Brexit, right? He also says that they never used to fly England flags in the last 10, 15, 20 years. Well, what about all the football matches he played in? Did he not see any England flags flying then, when he was in the World Cup? What's wrong with him?
Yeah, I know. And do you know what? I mean, Gary Neville, you know, who's Gary Neville, for goodness sake? Who's really interested in these, you know, these sort of like B-list celebrities that think they're these influencers that come out with all this nonsense? Well, look at the, how was it, 1 million, 2 million people that were marching with their flags in London on the 13th of March. Yeah. You know, and that was such a... oh my goodness, that moved me so much watching those pictures. Those are the middle-aged white men that Gary Neville
and women
is referring to.
Yeah, and middle-aged white women as well. And also there were quite a few people who were not white at that march as well. There were plenty of black people, there were plenty of brown people. You know, it's not about colour, but he and the left always make it about colour, don't they?
They always do. And do you know what? He is doing himself the divisive job that he refers to, that people like myself who proudly fly a flag in my garden and who rejoice when I drive under every motorway bridge now covered in Union Jacks and St George's crosses. Well, bring it on. And you know what, Gary Neville, you know, you've just finished your career because, you know, yeah, look at those pictures, Mike. Oh my gosh. That is what Reform is standing up. We are standing up for all of those people that we can see there on the screen that want to proudly fly the Union Jack. There is only one flag in this country, and it is the Union Jack, and that is the one that Reform will fly on every government and public building. And those are the people we're representing.
And there's an awful lot of them as well, and quite right too. More bad news for Keir Starmer and indeed for Kemi Badenoch. There's a new poll out last night. JLP Partners put out a poll surveying just over 6,000 British adults, asking the question, who do you think would make the better Prime Minister? And in March, believe it or not, the answer to that was Keir Starmer, 43%, Nigel Farage, 33%. Now, they say Nigel Farage, 35%, Keir Starmer, 34%. So Keir Starmer, since March, has literally lost 10 points. I mean, I don't know why he hasn't lost more. But the worst news for Kemi Badenoch is that the next choice is don't know. She's not even on it.
Well, look, Kemi Badenoch, bless her, she's irrelevant. And I'm sorry to say that, but the fact is we are the true party of opposition. And Nigel, as we know, will be the next Prime Minister of this country. And let's all rejoice when that happens, because we'll finally have somebody who's putting the British people first. And yeah, Keir Starmer, he just goes from disaster to disaster. And, we all hear it said, don't we, he's the most unpopular Prime Minister that this country's ever had. Well, it's quite incredible how quickly he's managed to fall down the popularity ratings.
It is absolutely amazing. Well, he's going off in search of some people that do like him, because on Tuesday he's going to India.
India.
Yeah, because he's promised them some tax breaks. I mean, we don't get any tax breaks, but he's promised people coming from India tax breaks so they can come and work in Britain. So I guess he's probably going to get a round of applause when he gets there.
Actually, that's a really important point that you've reminded me of then. I mean, the Labour government talk about these wonderful trade deals that Keir Starmer's doing around the world. That particular deal stops or allows Indian employers not to have to pay national insurance on the Indian employees that they're bringing in. Yeah. What a disgrace. Absolute disgrace. Again, taking jobs away from British people.
Exactly right. Sarah, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Sarah Pochin reporting in, Reform UK MP from Runcorn and Helsby. Let's get a voice note on Gary Neville from Jimmy.
Morning, Mike. It's Jimmy from Halifax. Gary Neville just bragging that he played for his country 80-odd times. Whoopee. He was the guy that was going to take the England team out on strike because of something that happened with Rio Ferdinand, and he didn't make a drugs test. And Gary Neville was going to take the England side out on strike. Very patriotic, Gary. Great show, Mike. Cheers.
Yeah, I'm afraid Gary Neville's antecedents will betray whether he's patriotic or not. And as James pointed out, our earlier voice noter, try and find some footage of him singing the national anthem, because he used to steadfastly not do so, according to those people in the know, and I seem to remember that. And also, what's all this rubbish he's talking about, saying he's never seen any Union flags or British flags or England flags flying in Manchester before? Why are we doing it now? Well, I'm sorry, but during every Euros competition, during every World Cup competition, if England managed to qualify, there were always England flags flying from all sorts of places. So he's obviously not only got no cogent memory at all, he's willfully actually disrespecting those people who fly flags because they're proud of their country, whether it's during a football tournament or not. This from Bill in Cheshire. Gary Neville, another hypocritical champagne socialist, mate of Andy Burnham, who was quite happy for white men to pay his wages at Man United while he was a footballer. Absolute planker. And Al in Margate says, morning Mike, did Gary Neville not see all those white older ladies at the March for the UK a few weeks ago? What a dipstick. Yeah, I'm afraid he hasn't made any friends here at Morning Glory this morning, Gary Neville, because he is indeed the epitome of a left-wing champagne socialist. He's literally a multi-millionaire. He's a property developer. He's a very, very famously wealthy footballer. And he appears to have made a complete idiot of himself overnight. 0344 499 1000. Coming up, we'll speak to Mike Neville about what police powers may mean for those people trying to march around outside migrant hotels. This is Talk.
I have been pushing ministers on this particular issue since the review was published. The cumulative impact of having a march week after week in central London, in other parts of the country, has been deeply intimidating for many British Jews. It's had a major impact upon the well-being of the Jewish community.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:24. I'm Mike Graham. It's Monday, the 6th of October, and don't forget the podcast is out every single weekday around about 10:15, 10:30. If you've missed any of it, we also on YouTube put out now the first hour of the show this morning with Rafe Heidelmann-Koo between 6 and 7. If you haven't seen that before, just go to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham YouTube channel and you can find it there every single day. It's a thing of beauty. This from Deborah in Lee. Mike, why is it that only the UK is accused of spreading hatred by raising our national flag? Go to any other country and they are flown with pride. I'm not a middle-aged white man, and when I see our flag it brings a smile to my face. Well, you don't even have to leave the actual country of Great Britain. You can go to Scotland and see loads of saltires flying. You go to Wales and see the Welsh flag flying high, and same goes for Northern Ireland. You know, you can go and see the flag of those countries very, very much on display, but only in this country would you see people actually taking the England flag down off a lamppost, or taking an England flag down off a flagpole on the basis that it was somehow an incitement to violence, or it was somehow white supremacist. It's absolute nonsense. It's only people like Gary Neville that keep this kind of rubbish going. Let's get a voice note from Lee.
Morning, Mike. Lee from Chelmsford. These pro-Hamas marches that are going on all the time, everyone's sick to death of them. Instead of changing the law, which takes forever to enact, I'd just bring in riot police, water cannon and mounted horses straight away. That'll get rid of them. All the best.
Yeah. Lee, listen, there's going to be a lot of views on this morning. We're going to talk to Mike Neville now. No relation, of course, to Gary Neville, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. Ike, very good morning to you.
Yes, good morning. I can verify I'm not related at all to...
No, not in any way, shape or form, I'm very happy to say. But I'm slightly concerned about this clampdown by Shabana Mahmood. I mean, Suella Braverman said just before the weekend that actually Shabana Mahmood did have the capability of blocking that Palestinian march on Saturday because, and I seem to remember this from times before, if the Metropolitan Police request for the Home Secretary to ban something, she can then ban it. I understand the police can't, but she can, but she chose not to. My concern is that obviously, you know, the way that she's described what powers she wants the police to have and what circumstances under which they would use them would probably apply to all sorts of marches, including those outside of migrant hotels and also those perhaps what they would regard as right-wing marches they don't like.
Yeah, this is the danger, isn't it, all the time? And the phrase is a serious disruption to the life of the community. This is when the police can ask the Home Secretary to ban a march. Now, what you're talking about there really is to really closing off every shop so people can get to shops, or maybe blocking a train station in a small area where there's no other travel. So it's got to be that's the phrase, serious disruption. Now, I would challenge the police. How are you going to enforce that is for people standing outside a hotel, for example, because people can still get to the shops, they can still travel around, people can still come in and out of that hotel. I think where it does apply, of course, is these mass marches every Saturday, pro-Palestinian marches, which have literally, what's happened now is that Jewish people are afraid to come to London on a Saturday, and that's absolutely scandalous in Britain in 2025. But just like you, Mike, what I fear is that any powers that were brought in will be used for the wrong purposes against the wrong people.
Yeah, and that is the problem, isn't it? Because the way that Shabana Mahmood has kind of phrased it, she said, you know, it could be used against any protest which continues in the same place, which a lot of the migrant hotel protests do, obviously outside the migrant hotels, and which causes, you know, disruption to the area, which again you could use it for that. You know, all of those kind of criteria will be able to be applied pretty much to anything.
Yes, it's cumulative impact. That's what they're saying. So at the moment, the police officer will be looking at that protest or that march on its own, standalone. What she's bringing in is, you can say, well, look at the other 10 or 20 that have occurred before, and it's a sort of adding up all that to make what disruption it is to the community. But I just think that they should, as I've said, be targeted against those Palestinian marches. They should be told, if you're going to do this, go to Hyde Park. They're the ones that take away literally thousands of officers. The protests at a hotel, there'd be maybe 10, 20 officers there. What you see there on the screen, those officers are from all over the country. There was officers from Northern Ireland making arrests in Trafalgar Square on Saturday, and these are the ones that have a massive impact. The protest there, 500 people arrested. Yeah. That's 500 sets of paperwork. How much police time is that going to take? Right. And whilst the officers doing that, they're not on patrol keeping communities safe. They're wasting time on these clones that you can see on your screen.
But that's the point, isn't it? And people have asked me to ask if I can find out, and I don't know whether you would know the answer to this, how many of those 500 people arrested would actually go through the whole process of being charged, fingerprinted, you know, DNA swabs taken? I mean, would that happen to all of them?
Yes, and what the Met have been quite clever about this, actually, because what the protesters were hoping is that they would flood the cells of the police station. So there's about 500 cells in London, so they would just shut the police down. Right. And the police have been shrewd. They take them to a sort of a school or some other big building, and they process them there. They'll take the fingerprints, DNA, confirm their identity, and then bail them out, so they don't clog up the cells, so people are arrested for violent crimes, burglary, robbery, and theft can be still locked in them. The trouble is, though, is that paperwork still has to be caught up with. Those people still have to return on bail and be dealt with, and this is the problem. It's really sapping the ability of the police to deal with real life crime, and we moan about the police dealing with tweets and stuff. We want them to stop doing that, but the time spent, there'll be some good hard working officers out there who want to catch burglars and robbers, and they're being stopped from doing that because they deal with this rubbish.
Well, one of the reasons Keir Starmer begged and asked the protesters not to do what they did on the weekend was because they wanted to free up the police to actually patrol some of the more Jewish areas of London to make sure that they were safe. But of course, these people don't care about that. You know, Matthew Said went down to see them from the Sunday Times, and he found out just exactly what kind of people they are. They don't care about the release of hostages. They don't really care even about the recognition of Palestine as a state. What they care about is hatred of Jews and the dismantling of the Jewish state, and they want to just see Israel wiped off the face of the map, and that's what they want to do. But, you know, at the end of the day, can they not be given banning orders, like football banning orders used to exist, to stop, you know, football hooligans going back into football matches?
There are certain orders that can be given under the Policing Act of 2022, the one that brings in this serious disruption to community life. But of course, they take a lot of time, and you've got to have a lot of proof. You know, this person's got to cause massive disruption. Yeah. But I just think on Saturday, these people lack basic humility, don't they? Humanity. Yeah. In the sense that, you know, we've all got the right to shout and scream and sing a song at a funeral, but we don't do that. We keep our mouths shut and we think this is the moment where we'll just pay some respect. Yeah. And they obviously lack that basic humanity.
Yeah, they clearly do. So, I mean, as far as this rule, how will the police be looking at this? I mean, will they be happy that the law is going to be clarified, or will they be unhappy about it?
Well, I think they will be happy because all the time they're worried about upsetting these characters. We know that there's this two-tier policing where too often police chiefs are very left-leaning and they'll look at one march in a very different eyes from another march. But here I think it just gives them more reason to say, well, we can add up all these tens of 20 demonstrations, protests, because it applies to static as well as moving protests as well. But the trouble is, I'm with you on this, Mike, and possibly some of the viewers and listeners, that it'll be used for all the wrong reasons. And it won't achieve what it's supposed to achieve.
No, of course. I think that's the problem. Mike, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard detective, chief inspector. James from Yorkshire says this morning, Mike, Gary Neville wouldn't need to drive along the Middleton Road to get from Salford to his home, yet he did. Obviously lost in Manchester or lost in madness. Well, he does seem a bit confused, doesn't he? Because at the start of the clip, he goes, I was on my way to Salford. Actually, I was on my way home from Salford. I was on my way to Salford. Well, which is it, Gary? Can you not remember which way you're going, for heaven's sake? Brian from Spain says, Gary Neville is perfectly right when he says the division is being caused by angry white men. Yeah, like Keir Starmer and John Swinney. Wakey, wakey, Gary. Let's get a voice note from Kitty.
Hi, Kitty from Kent here. Just wanted to give a comment on Gary Neville. Basically, he played badly for England for 20 years or so that's not patriotism. And I think he took the knee for the hate group Black Lives Matter. And he is the ultimate champagne socialist. Absolutely terrible person. You could call him a plank.
I think he might well make Plank of the Week this week, has to be said. This from Margaret in Birmingham. Gary Neville has white, middle-aged, well-known friends. Will they agree with him? Let's wait and see. Will Sky tell him to button it? No way. We are talking Sky here. She says, P.S. and Starmer on his travels again on October the 7th. It's a very good point. That is, of course, tomorrow, Tuesday. He's going to India. He says he's going to reaffirm our shared values. Oh, really? Well, maybe he's just looking for somebody to say hello to, because nobody in this country wants to speak to him anymore. We don't even want him to be Prime Minister, according to a new poll. Nobody does. Nobody likes him. Nobody wants him in the party. Nobody wants him in Downing Street. Nobody wants him, period. So, what's he going to do? I know. Let's get on a plane and go somewhere foreign, because that will solve it, won't it? 7:35.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:37. Malk in Notts says this morning, Mike, these plasticine action marches, why doesn't the government impose a massive fine on the idiots, arrest them, then give them an automatic fine? They can do it with car drivers. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if everybody who went on those marches knew they were going to get fined, I don't know, 500 quid or something, or maybe even £1,000, that would soon stop them. It would soon keep them in their little enclaves, wherever it is they come from, up and down the nation with their stupid banners. I mean, one guy was being arrested yesterday with the Israeli flag basically on his sweatshirt, and inside the Star of David, he had drawn a swastika. Now, everybody can see that is not about saving Palestine. That is not about getting the hostages free. That is about hatred of Israel. That is about making out that Israel is the same as the Nazis. And therefore, surely, that is a hate crime, isn't it? So why can't you just fine them? Don't worry about arresting them. Just have an on-the-spot fine, like you can do, as I say, with car drivers. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Gary Neville has, all these celebrities just help themselves, Mike, because that is all Gary Neville is now, a two-bit celebrity that we might see in the jungle. Real people are not buying it, and the polls are proof of that. That's from Dan in Kent. Yeah, I mean, real people basically don't pay any attention to what Gary Neville and people like Gary Neville say. He's a champagne socialist, he's a hypocrite. He went to Qatar, he took the money from the Qataris, and he was quite happy to do that. And nevertheless, he thinks that the Union Jack and the flag of England are in some way offensive, and he claims that he himself took one down in one of his own many property sections that he lives in and owns. So, he set himself aside, I think, this morning from all right-thinking people, and particularly to blame white middle-aged men for all the trouble that cross-culture and multicultural Britain is in right now, particularly in the wake of a murder in Manchester by an Islamic terrorist against Jewish people, is extraordinary. Let's get a voice note from Steve.
Steve from Barnsley. Told Gary Neville needs to keep his nose out. Just another Gary footballer that's headed far too many overinflated balls. He has had a few more bumps to the head than the regular person. What a plonker.
Yeah, I think so. Plank of the week incoming. Let's talk to Heidi Hommel, though. She's KTAR's news reporter over in Phoenix, Arizona. Donald Trump this morning on the front page of the Times warning of a absolute obliteration of Hamas if they do not agree to the negotiators' deals about the release of the hostages. Negotiators flying to Egypt. There are, I think, talks going on as we speak. To try and confirm a deal to release hostages to end the war in Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered an Israeli delegation headed by Ron Dermer to depart for talks in Sharm el-Sheikh. They'll be joined by officials from Hamas, and also Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, and Steve Witkoff are due to attend as well. Let's find out what's being said in the US of A. Heidi, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to talk to you. There seems to be some real traction behind this plan. Hamas have indicated that they're certainly willing to talk. So Donald Trump, once again, has kind of confounded his critics and actually managed to get these people around a table.
Yeah, he is orchestrating this ceasefire. And now here's how it would work. Hamas would have to agree to release the rest of the hostages. They would also have to relinquish control in the Gaza Strip and agree to disarm. And in exchange, Israel would withdraw its troops from the Gaza Strip, and they would release about 1,000 Palestinian prisoners.
Yeah. And as far as the timetable for all of that is concerned, I mean, Donald Trump warning about obliteration. Has he put a time frame on the actual negotiations and when they should be, sort of considered to be done?
President Trump is still waiting on a response from Hamas to agree to disarm. That's kind of the hang-up right now. And if they agree to disarm, he says that this ceasefire and this whole plan to exchange the prisoners and the hostages would be set into motion immediately. I think they have 72 hours to release the hostages once the exchange is sort of set in motion.
Right. And so in terms of the American reaction to this, I mean, we know, for example, an awful lot of people, when Trump got in, were giving the impression, and he was giving the impression, that they don't really want to see Americans getting involved in foreign conflicts. They don't want to see American troops having to go in anywhere. Is there any sort of suggestion that American troops would be used at some point, even if it was for, like, peacekeeping purposes?
Well, I don't know what President Trump meant by Hamas would be obliterated. To me, that kind of sounds like he's threatening to use the United States military to obliterate Hamas if they don't agree to this plan, and they don't agree soon.
Right. That's what I thought. And I mean, when I hear the word obliterate, you kind of think of them doing things like, how they carpet bombed Afghanistan. You can't really do that in Palestine, can you?
No, that you can't because there's too many people. But, you know, he could send in the special forces. He could send in the Navy SEALs. He could send in Marines. The United States is one of the most lethal militaries in the world, and President Trump's not afraid to use it.
No, exactly right. So would you expect there to be something coming out of all of this week then?
Absolutely. I think, you know, President Trump is done waiting, really. And this is, I don't know how many times he's been trying to negotiate this ceasefire. So I think the president's fed up. And if he doesn't get the response that he wants from Hamas soon, who knows if we are going to send in United States troops.
Yeah, we shall see. Heidi, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Heidi Hommel, there, KTAR news reporter with the latest from the US of A. Because it would seem, again, everybody's gone very quiet. You know, all of those kind of pro-Palestine commentators who have always been saying that they want a ceasefire suddenly went very quiet when there was a peace deal on the table. They didn't seem to want to say anything about it. And now that it looks like Donald Trump has actually got not only Hamas and the Israelis and the US around a table in Egypt and Sharm el-Sheikh, they're not saying much about that either. They're not urging, instead of being out on the streets of London, urging for Hamas to surrender the hostages and to start proper peace negotiations and start leaving the Palestinian people to their own devices, not run by a terrorist organisation, not terrified to move, not terrified to walk down the street in case they get murdered by Hamas for saying the wrong thing, actually campaigning, you know, cheek by jowl with the Israelis to get rid of a terrorist group running a country. No, they don't want to do that. Why? Well, you know why. Because secretly they actually support Hamas. Why? Because secretly they want an end to Israel. That's what it's all about. It's not about helping the hostages. It's not about getting a peace plan for Palestine. It's about wiping out Israel. That's why these marches in London have to be stopped in some way, shape or form. But we have to be very careful, if the government wants to stop that march, that they don't get permission to stop every other march that is ever going to take place around anything to do with British politics, because that's where I think Shabana Mahmood would like to take the rules. And we don't want her to do that. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a voice note from Adrian.
Morning, Mike, Rafe. Going to be a great show. This is Adrian from East Sussex. Am I the only one in the country sick and tired of these extremely rich ex-footballers who've been paid obscene salaries when they're playing and then made even more money? And I don't begrudge them the money, but they then tell us how to live. They will have no problem with multiculturalism. They can live in their gated communities, and if the country goes down the tube, well, so what? They'll move to another luxury lifestyle somewhere else in the world. Sick of them, all of them.
Yeah, Adrian, you speak for the nation, I think, there. Everybody's sick of Gary Neville. You know, pompous, absolutely over sort of inflated ego, complete and utter narcissist, thinks that people care what he thinks that because he kicked the ball around for a while and made quite a lot of money, that he's now got some great reason to explore what his views are and to tell everybody about them. You know, everybody knows that he's literally Andy Burnham's puppet. Andy Burnham's got his hand up his back, tells him what to say, makes him sound intelligent. Doesn't make you sound intelligent, Gaza. Makes you sound like an idiot. Makes you sound like you've got no idea what's going on. Why didn't you ever go at the Islamist cult that developed that guy Jihadi, who murdered Israelis and murdered British Jews, rather, on Thursday in Manchester, your home city? Why did you not talk about him? Why did you not blame him for some of the division that's being caused in the country? Why did you blame angry, middle-aged white men? I don't know. Exeter, this is from Jeremy. All those middle-aged white men who Neville so despises are the ones who for years have spent their hard-earned money making him rich by buying season tickets and subscriptions to Sky. Yeah, talk about biting the hand that feeds. I think Sky might have a bit of a problem because quite a few people online certainly saying they're chucking in their subscription now and they're going to boycott it because they don't want to watch the plonker Gary Neville. I don't blame them. This is Talk.
as a local resident, somebody who was born and bred here. I shouldn't have said that.
You see why this is people sometimes think that Reform are very much against having people here.
I found it hard to believe it wasn't a comedy sketch. Certain people in our society sprinkle words such as far right and fascist and racist around now so liberally that it makes many people walk on eggshells, even in this case a reform counsellor who you would think would know better.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to very nearly 10 minutes to 8. We are, of course, at Monday, the 6th of October. Tomorrow, the second anniversary of the October the 7th massacre in Israel, when Hamas took it upon themselves to invade a sovereign country, take people hostage, many of whom are still being held 2 years on. They've killed many of them as well, butchering, raping, burning people to death, you know, slitting people's throats, beheading people, you know, watching, making children watch their parents being murdered, killing children as well. As I say, just a completely, absolutely ghastly event, which of course will be celebrated by some people in this country. There will be people out, and there are worries in the papers today, people will be out there demonstrating for what happened on October the 7th in university campuses around Britain. They may even be demonstrating in cities around Britain. We saw, even after the Prime Minister urged them not to do it, pro-Palestinian marchers getting arrested in London, in Manchester, in Edinburgh, chanting, you know, freedom for Palestine, but at the same time, death to Israel. And a lot of these people have got no intention of getting anywhere near the hostages or getting any conversation going with the hostages. Matthew Said from the Sunday Times went down to the demonstration on the weekend to try and find out what made these people tick, and he said he was actually appalled by what he found. The numbers of people filled with hatred, numbers of people who just dislike Jews, a number of people who were there purely and simply because they think Jewish people have no right to walk the streets of this country and feel safe, and purely and simply because they want to see the end and the destruction of Israel as a democratic state, the only democratic state in the Middle East. The government now, under Shabana Mahmoud's tutelage as the Home Secretary, says they want to ban these marches. They're absolutely right to do so. But the difficulty is, how do you do that without giving the government permission to ban all sorts of other marches as well? 0344 499 1000. You see what I'm saying? The problem is you'll get people like the local police in Essex banning migrant hotel demonstrations, which have been going on outside the Bell Hotel now in Epping for quite some time, banning marches around London or perhaps in other cities around the country because they think they're being organised by right-wingers. They might not like them. They might get rid of those as well. That's what we have to be careful about. Let's talk to Robert Bates, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control, because there's plenty of reasons to ask questions still about the migrant situation in this country. We know the one-in, one-out scenario has worked, I think, so far. They're very quiet about it, but I think they've now managed to get rid of about 10 people from here to France. Meanwhile, thousands and thousands, of course, have come in. 57,638 is the migrant tracker this morning. That's since Keir Starmer was Prime Minister in July of last year. And the number who have come in 2025 alone is somewhere around about 34,000. There you go, 34,396. It goes up roughly about 1,000 a week at the moment, and it will continue to do so. The Tories now, who have got their conference going on in Manchester under Kemi Badenoch, are saying they're going to deport 150,000 a year, which sounds a bit similar to what Reform have promised to do. They say they'll get their own ICE force, similar to what happens in America. Robert, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Good to see you. I mean, it's hard to take the Tories seriously, really, on immigration, isn't it? Because they spent so many years making so many promises and failing to deliver those promises. I mean, I take their point that they were stymied at every turn by the Labour Party and by Keir Starmer in particular. But nevertheless, their record on immigration is woeful, isn't it?
Yeah, it does feel that this has come probably a bit too late to really seize the zeitgeist of the conversation as well. I would argue, have probably moved on in terms of it being already accepted in the public domain that leaving the ECHR is necessary. Some of the overhauls to immigration tribunals are, of course, essential steps as well. But, you know, the blueprint that they've put out, I think, you know, it's good to have an objective. I think it's very good to set a target for yourself. I think some of the reforms that they are setting out to immigration tribunals and really trying to cement in the public's mind that they do mean this is encouraging. I do then, however, look at the sort of what I suppose you would call party grandees that have come out and commented on this, you know, the Robert Falcons of the world and the Tobias Ellwoods. And you think, you know, you could have the most beautiful, pristine plan in the world, but will you ever actually get to implement it when you are still a Conservative party that sadly has far too many Liberal Democrat adjacent grandees and sort of senior within the apparatus of the party. So I think, you know, the document is all very well and good, and I think it is important that we actually recognise we need to increase the removals teams that we do have in the country. I think they're woefully underfunded at the moment. But again, on the other hand, you know, part of the problem of the last 14 years was this sort of left-wing branch of the party that's held back anything that could be significant and actually help us in this problem.
That is the problem as well. And as soon as we saw her saying that she was going to call for, you know, the end of the ECHR, of course, you know, the Tories got back to the same old ways, and suddenly all these other Tories were popping up on television stations and radio stations around the country saying, no, we shouldn't be doing that. So, again, they're still fighting over, you know, like rats in a sack over policy to do with immigration.
Yeah, exactly. And it is those individuals that have never allowed anything sort of common sense to actually be implemented that have really, it really falls on their shoulders the last 14 years, the mess of the last 14 years. These are people that have sort of prioritised their own sense of self-importance and their own idea of statesmanship over actually taking any of the radical action that, frankly, is the only way this country can get out of the mess that it is in. And I think, unfortunately, they still hold far too much power and far too much clout in the Conservative Party. As I say, the plan is very encouraging. There's probably a bit more they need to set out on the operational side of things and so forth. But I really think this idea of using sort of diplomatic levers to browbeat countries of origin into taking back their illegal migrants is a good step. I really think doing away with the left-wing judges that we see case after case as to why they're such a travesty is another good step. But it all comes back down to, will they be able to implement it?
Well, that's right. You know, Keir Starmer's off to India tomorrow to go and see Prime Minister Modi, at which we're going to apparently listen to him talking about the shared values and the kind of the shared targets that they want to hit. You know, but speaking of that, we've had situations where we've exported or deported, I should say, one Indian migrant to France because France have got an agreement to return people to India. But we apparently haven't. If we've got this great trade deal with India and we're encouraging people from India to come to this country to work under, you know, what might be described as favourable tax conditions, why can we not have an agreement to send people who've overstayed their visas, people who shouldn't be here, straight back to India?
That's a really good point. And of course, India is one of the biggest nationalities that do appear in the illegal migrant population. And you look at situation, the number of visas that we award each year to India, number of tourist visas, the amount of foreign aid, the amount of a trade deficit we have with India, you have to ask yourselves, why is it sort of taken us so long to realise that actually we can start to flex a little bit of muscle and start to require this country to play ball? We've seen what the US has done with countries in Africa in particular, where they've been really, really strident in implementing visa sanctions, and the results transformative. Ghana, for instance, buckled almost immediately as soon as these measures were put in place and started taking back their nationals almost straight away. This is something that I think we've cottoned onto it. I think it's a really good device and something that you know, the Britain of old would have not hesitated to implement. And sadly, the establishment of the last 20 or so years has been a lot more self-effacing and a lot weaker than probably we needed. But it's definitely right to recognise this is a huge point of leverage for us.
Yeah, no, I think so. Robert, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Robert Bates, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Let's get a voice note from Nick.
Let's be clear. These protests are not pro-Palestinian protests. They're anti-Jewish protests, precipitated by this ghastly government's craven capitulation to Hamas in recognising Palestine, a state that doesn't even exist.
Exactly right. And this from Ivor, who says, yesterday out in London we accidentally ran into the pro-Palestine march. We saw one of the ringleaders holding a megaphone, and my friend asked him, how long is all this going to go on for? He said, until Palestine is free. How exactly are you going to judge that, my friend asked. His answer was, when the Israeli state no longer exists. So in short, we're stuck with these bloody protests forever, folks. I know. That is part of the problem, isn't it? And we'll be talking more about that throughout the course of the next couple of hours, because we're really almost very nearly the halfway mark. The 8 o'clock hour comes to an end, and we'll be going into the 9 o'clock hour. Lots of other stories to talk about, including this one, which is on page 25 of the Sun this morning. The number of OAPs admitted to hospital for snorting cocaine has soared by a third in the last 2 years. I don't know what they're doing, but they're certainly doing things a lot quicker, and they're not sleeping as much, it would seem. Apparently several people have been admitted to hospital in their 90s. In their 90s, I kid you not. Many use the Class A drugs to try to treat ailments they cannot get fixed on the NHS. What, like, I've got a bit of a cold. I think I'll just do a couple of quick lines and see if that helps. I don't know. See you after the news.
Your Majesty, Melania and I are deeply grateful to you and Queen Camilla for your extraordinary graciousness. And to William and Kate, thank you so much. It's been so great being with you today. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's a singular privilege to be the first American president welcomed here. The phrase special relationship, seen from American eyes, the word special does not begin to do it justice. We're joined by history and fate, and by love and language. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be with you.
Security remains the cornerstone of this special relationship. We have the deepest, most advanced defense relationship in the world.
As I said last night, the bond between our countries is like no other anywhere in the world. The United States and the United Kingdom have done more good on this planet than any two nations in human history.
We are working together to end the humanitarian catastrophe in the Middle East.
The one that I thought would be easiest would be because of my relationship with President Putin, but he's let...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 8. It is, of course, Monday, the 6th of October. We are one day away from the anniversary of October the 7th. And as Fiona says, tomorrow is the anniversary of October 7th massacre. Keir Starmer, who talks of standing united and not divided, is where? Yeah, he's going to India. Days after a terrorist event in this country. Absolutely unbelievable. We're talking about that. We're talking about the business of the fallout from Manchester and that synagogue attack last Thursday. Of course, David Lammy was booed when he tried to address the community of Jewish neighbours in that neck of the woods. John Swinney got the same treatment up in Scotland when he tried to talk about recognising Palestine. It turns out that the jihadi named Jihadi, who actually carried out the murderous attack in Manchester, was out on bail for rape. It also turns out that he was a bigamist, and it also turns out his father, who's a surgeon in the NHS, was a sympathiser for the October the 7th massacre by Hamas 2 years ago. So we've got that to talk about. Gary Neville, meanwhile, thinks it's got nothing to do with hate clerics that have caused all these problems in Britain. It's got nothing to do with the mass immigration disaster that's happened under both the Tories and Labour. Oh no, of course it's nothing to do with that. It's all to do with Brexit and angry middle-aged white men. That's what he says. A lot of people now calling for his shows on Sky TV to be boycotted on the basis that he has insulted not only most of Britain, but he's insulted all of the white and middle-aged men that paid his wages all that time when he played for Manchester United and England, and also, of course, who paid his wages when they bought tickets to go and watch him playing for England, which he says he played for 85 times and was very patriotic about, although some people have said he never did sing the national anthem. Let's get a montage of your thoughts this morning.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark from Derby here. Morning, Mike. It's James from Blackburn. The year of common sense.
I don't know what you have in the morning or at night, but you're always so glowing and gorgeous.
Morning, Mike. Sean in Leicester.
The show has lasted longer than my typical gym membership, Mike, so you're doing something right.
Thank you very much indeed. You know the number, 0344 499 1000 if you want to get on and take part. We've got so much to talk about this morning, including Shabana Mahmood, the woman who is the Home Secretary of this fair nation of ours, who wants to give more powers to the police to ban protests. But the thing is this, right? Yes, of course, we all want to see these Palestinian protests banned, as long as they call for the destruction of Israel, as long as they include people who have such hatred for Jewish people in this country that Jewish people don't feel safe walking amongst them, right? But she doesn't just want to ban this protest, she wants to ban all sorts of other protests, and I'm going to suggest to you that she might try and ban all sorts of protests that would be regarded as right-wing under her tutelage, and also those migrant hotel protests as well. She probably would like to have a go at those. 0344 499 1000. We'll also talk about this Chinese story. A Chinese spy case collapsed, and Jonathan Pohl is to blame. He's the close member of the chief of the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff's list. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. Unbelievably, I've been sent this, right, by Sandy, one of our regular listeners. And this is an advert that's come out of, I'm not quite sure where, but it's an order now for Christmas, right? Christmas is coming. The goose is getting fat. Well, I'll tell you about, never mind the goose. How about this? A turkey. This is some of the things that are being sold. A collection Oakham slow-cooked turkey and trimmings is on sale at Marks & Spencer's. The box includes everything you need for a flavour-packed Christmas feast, from a tender British turkey joint stuffed with pork and Italian chestnuts and wrapped in bacon, to sous vide roast potatoes, maple and thyme carrots, spiced cabbage, pigs in blankets, a rich turkey gravy, plus it all cooks in just over an hour. That serves 6 and is only £80, right? Meanwhile, if you've got a bit more money, because, you know, everybody's got a bit of spare money coming up to Christmas, you can have this collection free-range, traditionally prepared bronze whole turkey, which apparently has been free to roam on cherry orchards and meadows. This exceptional festive centrepiece has been slower grown for tenderness. How do you slow grow a turkey? How do you do that? Surely it grows naturally. I don't know. Anyway, then it's dry hung for up to 10 days to intensify its rich, complex flavour. Hand prepared for our butchers. It includes giblets. So it's basically a turkey and giblets, right? How much do you think they want for that? It serves 8 to 10. 14.5 kilograms, so it's pretty big. You probably need an oven, like an industrial oven, to cook it in. 150 quid. 150 quid, any takers? I'll start you at £150, you know. Yeah, go over to the rich-looking bloke in the back. 150 quid for a turkey and giblets. Who says that the cost of living has gone out of control? Crikey. Let's talk to Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism UK. He's up at Tory Party Conference in Manchester. Mark, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Good to be with you.
I mean, you can tell things are ratcheting out of control in the economy when you're going to have to fork out £150 for a turkey at Christmas.
Yeah, that's pretty grim, isn't it? I mean, you know, the cost of living goes up and up and up.
wages not really keeping track with inflation. Everybody feels like they're getting a little bit poorer rather than a little bit richer every year, and after a while that starts to bite, because that seems to be the new normal now, right? It's not that we've just gone through an economic shock, it's just that the economy seems to be permanently just sort of bouncing along the floor. There doesn't seem to be much to look forward to in the 2 or 3 years ahead. All politicians talk about economic growth, don't they, Mike? But it seems to be completely elusive. We are just carrying on really on the bottom, and we could even tip into a recession, I would think, this year.
I would think so. I mean, because all we see now every single week is another idea being floated by the Treasury as to where to get some more tax from. You know, last week we heard it was going to be a possibility of tax on private health care. We've heard about the possible tax on pensions, the possible mansion tax, and the doing away with council tax. This morning on the front of the iPaper, we've got Rachel Reeves looking at bank profits to raise billions, possible tax hike on the banks.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, really. Here's the reality. Here's the political problem more than the economic problem. The Labour Party is completely unwilling to consider any meaningful cut in spending anywhere. I mean, they tried to pilot through some modest changes in welfare spending. I don't think they were particularly well thought out, but they were modest. Couldn't get that through their backbenches. So if they're not even going to be able to trim government spending, the fact of the matter is, Mike, that they're bound to reach for the tax lever, right? Because we've got a huge deficit. You can't borrow anymore. So they are scurrying around working out what on earth they can tax that isn't nailed to the floor. I mean, they're probably going to end up taxing things that are nailed to the floor, because otherwise you start moving your assets away. So I fear there might be quite heavy taxes on property coming up, right? Because it's pretty hard to hide your house or move it out of the country. So I think you should be braced for that if you've got a valuable property. But yeah, there is definitely now going to be yet a further tax grab, as if our problems weren't big enough in the economy, that government spending, which tends to be fairly inefficient, is so high. Taxes are the highest since the Second World War. No wonder there's no growth, right? We need to get that into reverse, start to get spending down, then you can get taxes down, then the economy and the private sector can breathe. But I'm afraid Rachel Reeves and the Labour government appear to have no appetite for that, or if Rachel Reeves does have any sort of appetite for it, her backbenchers aren't willing to countenance it in any way whatsoever.
No, I mean, they've already tried to save what is considered to be a fairly measly amount of £5 billion on the welfare budget, and they couldn't even get that done. It wasn't really even a saving, it was a promise not to spend it, more than it was actually a slashing and burning, you know. But it seems to me now that if you mentioned the housing market there, I mean, that's a great example of what has now just completely stagnated, and it's stagnated largely due to the Labour government's policies. You know, the stamp duty increase has caused many people to decide just not to move house because they don't want to pay the extra amount of money. I mean, Labour this morning in the papers are promising to make it faster for house buyers to move home, basically saying that they're going to save buyers hundreds of pounds other proposals that require vendors and agents to take on the burden of legal paperwork before a sale starts. I mean, it says here it comes amid fears of a downturn in the market. People that I talk to in the property market say it's not a downturn, it's completely flat. There's no market right now.
Yeah, I think that's right, Mike. And of course, the even bigger problem is, and you can't blame all of this on the Labour government over the last year, we need to look back over the last 20 or 30 years, is supply has not caught up with demand, right? We just have been feeble at building new homes. So Labour had this target, I think, was it 1.5 million over this Parliament? Well, that wouldn't even keep pace with population growth. Right. So we haven't even got a construction sector that is seriously underway. I mean, I think in an ideal world, you need a slow and steady approach to building many more homes, which would tend to mean actually that house prices fall over the longer term. You don't want an immediate collapse. You don't want people who have still got a mortgage to fall into colossal negative equity. But unless we build, then I'm afraid that this problem of young people failing to get on the housing ladder, you're having to save up until you're in your 40s to get on the housing ladder, especially if you're in London and the South East. That's going to be a perennial feature of the British economy, and not a healthy one, because we want more and more homeowners and more people having a stake in the system. Well, we've probably wiped out a generation from that already because house prices are so expensive. So again, you've got all of this tinkering with stamp duty, all of the rest of it, probably deterring people from downsizing their homes. so not freeing those sort of properties onto the market, and no ability, I think, to get anywhere close to the 1.5 million homes target that Labour has set, and even that 1.5 million target is insufficient. So we're not making strides forward in any of the areas that we need to. So, as usual on your show, Mike, I have to tell you, I think things are slowly but surely going to get worse. I'm afraid.
Quite. And the tinkering around the edges is no more in view than this morning. Very, very clear from Keir Starmer's perspective. He's put out his first tweet since Saturday, just a few moments ago, at 8:01, just on this very subject. He says, "I promised that my government would fix the broken housing system. Get this, buying or selling a home will be faster, unlocking the dream of home ownership and allowing hard-working people to focus on the next chapter of their lives." That's national renewal. No, it isn't. That's just complete and utter out-of-touch nonsense. You've just described the housing market as flat. I mean, I would call it even worse than flat. I'd say it's been completely destroyed. He's talking about buying or selling a home faster, which he won't be doing, because people aren't buying houses because they either can't afford it or they're waiting to see what happens in November. It won't be faster because all he's saying is that they're going to make upfront payments become something which isn't an impediment to buying houses. It's just rubbish.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the problem, one of the many things, Mike, that frustrates me about this Labour government is that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor seem to think if they wish hard enough, they can make certain things happen.
Yeah.
I mean, they seem to be just wishing for there to be economic growth. Keir Starmer, in that tweet you just quoted, is just wishing for a better housing market.
Right.
There's no tough policy decisions to really back that up, and I'm afraid you don't get a better housing market or more economic growth just by conducting some sort of rain dance. You actually need some pretty decent economic policies, and we just aren't seeing any of those. At best it's tinkering, usually tinkering in the wrong direction, and that's not enough to kickstart the economy, that's not enough to turn around the housing market, and that's why everything's so sluggish and is going to stay sluggish unless there's a really dramatic change of direction. But neither Keir Starmer nor Rachel Reeves seem to be remotely interested in a dramatic change of direction. They seem more interested in investing in the power of prayer, basically, to hope that things turn around. And
exactly.
That is not a decent economic strategy.
It's really not. I mean, meanwhile, you're at Tory Party conference, which by the looks of things so far is not particularly well attended. I've seen various tweets from various members of the media saying it's really dull and dead and not much happening. An awful lot of promises being made as well, but it's almost, I spoke to Mel Stride a bit earlier on about his wish to save 47 billion off the budget is a mix of welfare savings and a cut in foreign aid. We've got Tories on the front page of the Times pledging a tax bonus of £5,000 for people buying their first home, getting their first job. I mean, somebody said to me, they're a bit like the Lib Dems at the moment. They can promise pretty much anything they like because they won't ever be in power to get anywhere near, bringing it in.
Yeah, look, Mike, I'd be lying to you if I said that the mood here at the Conservative Party conference is enormously upbeat. It isn't. And if it was upbeat, it would be delusional. The party is obviously in an incredibly difficult place in the polls. The Kemi Badenoch strategy is this. It's to slowly but steadily roll out very well thought out policies, hundreds of pages of backup material, and in the hope that a kind of serious and detailed approach will eventually appeal to the British electorate. I mean, my worry slightly is that the policy commissions that she's set up, she's just announced that the Conservatives would indeed now leave the European Convention on Human Rights, are taking an awful long time to get to the conclusion that Nigel Farage may have been right about things all along, whether that's on ECHR or carbon net zero, where the Conservatives are also abandoning the carbon net zero target. So how are you going to distinguish yourselves between the Conservatives and Reform? Well, the concept is that the Conservatives will have a properly serious, worked-out plan that all adds up on a decent spreadsheet. But, Mike, the problem there is if nobody's listening, you're not going to get any cut-through on that. They might also be thinking that if the economy becomes more and more of an issue, immigration has perhaps dominated political debate, but if the economy and the poor performance of the economy becomes an issue, perhaps then the Conservatives get another hearing. But you're right to say, Mike, that at the moment, if the party's in the mid to high teens in the opinion polls, it doesn't look like it's it's on the verge of forming a government. So understandably, people just turn away and look at the parties that could form a government. So I think there needs to be a slightly bolder approach from the Conservative Party. And I don't really think the Conservatives have yet given the British public a good enough explanation of what went so badly wrong over their 14 years in office and why. There's just a sort of, well, we're under new management now, let's all move on and forget about it. But I think they need a much more compelling explanation as to why things particularly ended so badly over that 14-year period.
Well, that's right.
Unless you issue a proper and understandable apology, why would the public listen to you again?
Yeah, because the public have moved on, unfortunately, but they've moved on to reform. I think that's the big problem the Tories have got.
That's right.
But Mark, listen, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for taking the time. Mark Littlewood up there, Manchester Conservative Party Conference. He's Director of Popular Conservatism, saying, they need to really do a bit more to explain what went wrong and why it went wrong so badly towards the end of Rishi Sunak's premiership, because it really did. Let's get a voice note from Tony.
Morning, Mike. Tony from North Somerset. I'm not going to talk about Gary Neville because the bloke's an idiot. But what I will talk about is there were nearly 500 arrests in the capital over the weekend. The silence from the government is deafening. The silence from Sadiq Khan is deafening. As you're aware, I'm from Bristol, and yesterday there was protests in Bristol, and the anti-Semitic shouts that were coming out from students, bearded lefties and stuff like that, women being spat at, and the police just idly stood by, like Avon and Somerset are doing with the Bob Villan guy who still hasn't been charged. Keep up the good work, mate.
Absolutely right, Tony. Thanks very much indeed. This from Lorraine, who says, I'm absolutely disgusted at the sight of Lammy turning up at the Manchester Vigil. This is a man who actively campaigned against Israel. He reinstated funding for UNRWA, known to harbour terrorists, supported the arrest warrant from Netanyahu, placed untold sanctions on Israeli business, and avidly supported the recognition of the State of Palestine. And last week, unforgivably lied directly to the public by linking Nigel Farage to the Hitler Youth. He is present at the vigil was an insult. How dare he spew his vacuous, meaningless support? Well, let's have a reminder of what happened. This was just at the weekend on Friday. David Lammy, unbelievably, was sent up to Manchester to supposedly sympathise with the Jewish community.
I have great pleasure in introducing our Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy. And before I do, please, 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 we know how we all feel. We know how we all feel.
On the street. My children's school was closed today. You have allowed this to happen. David Lammy, you have allowed this to happen. You are all guilty of it all. You have allowed Jew hatred in Manchester on the street. You have allowed it. You are all guilty. We do not want you speaking here today. Do not speak. You defeated. Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you! Shame on you!
Lamentable Lammy, indeed. Coming up later on in the show, we'll be talking about the anti-Semitic flavour of what was going on across the weekend, of course. We'll be finding out from a Jewish leader precisely how bad the BBC has been about all of this as well. This, though, on the subject of the cocaine-snorting OAPs, one from Sue in Essex. Mike, great show. Perhaps snorting cocaine helps to keep you warm in the winter. Keep up the great work. I don't know about that. Mark in Selby says, Mike, you cannot blame the OAPs who are dreaming of a white Christmas. It will take their mind off the dreadful government and perhaps help keep them warm. What's next? Xanax Easter? Yeah, well, you never know, do you? I mean, for some people, there's not much way of looking at it. In fact, in a miserable way. So more OAPs than ever are taking cocaine. Extraordinary. It's 22 minutes past 8. Coming up, we're going to speak to Henry Hill, columnist at The Sun from Conservative Home. He's going to tell us why this could be Kemi Badenoch's last stand. And if she doesn't do something quick, she might be out of a job as leader of the Conservative Party. That's next.
He wants evolution to bring it into a sort of modern era. And I think that means some of the traditions that you see, maybe things like the Garter Parade and things like that, the dressing up side of it, he's definitely not one for wearing all the robes. His father doesn't mind doing that, but in William's case, he's far less comfortable doing that. So I think that's the sort of thing. It might look different, but again, he knows he's got to make sure the royal family feels relevant.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 25 minutes past 8. The time is flying. We've got Keir Starmer making his first tweet of the last 2 days. He tweeted out last on Saturday in which he urged everybody not to march around London, please, or any other part of Britain, because it's time to allow the Jewish communities of this country to mourn their dead and their injured after that terrorist attack up in Manchester on Thursday. Of course, they didn't pay any attention to it. Of course, they couldn't care less about mourning for people who they hate, because that's what they do. They hate people. Meanwhile, Conservative Party conference gets underway yesterday. Kemi Badenoch stood in front of some signs in which it said that they were strengthening the borders. Henry Hill joins us now. He is, of course, the deputy editor of Conservative Home. He's written a column in The Sun today in which he says, spotlight time for Last Chance Kemi. Today is the Conservative Party's in Manchester for Kemi Badenoch's first conference as party leader. Whether or not she will get a second one is an open question, and both MPs and party members will be paying close attention to how she and the party perform over the next few days. Henry, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
On the face of it, I don't know if you're up there at the moment, on the face of it, it looks a pretty sort of sparsely attended event, and a lot of journalists are already making the point that it's nothing like even last year's conference, and certainly nothing like any conference they've seen before when the Tories were in power. It's all looking a bit bleak, is what I'm hearing.
No, I am in Manchester. That's why I'm in this slightly bleakly lit hotel room, because the desk lamp isn't working. So I'm in the shadows. No, it is. I mean, last year's conference, obviously, there were a couple of factors, I think, which lent it a slight sort of cartoon character running on air quality. The first was that the leadership contest meant that all the media was there, and it was still felt very packed. But also, because Rishi called a surprise election, a lot of the big corporates had already booked their conference before he called it, right? And so last year's conference really didn't feel all that different to a conference when we were in power. Now it very much does feel like an opposition conference, and like a new to opposition conference. Everything is quieter, everything is less packed, the sort of main hall is smaller.
Yeah, and I guess that's an inevitability, because the money leaves, doesn't it, as government ceases to exist, I suppose, and the money all goes elsewhere. But, I mean, in terms of the mood, I mean, one of the things that I found fascinating yesterday was that the Tories don't yet seem to have learned from their mistakes. You know, when Kemi Badenoch comes out and starts talking a bit tougher on immigration, starts talking about leaving the ECHR, starts talking about deporting 150,000 people a year, suddenly the wets come out of the woodwork again and say, oh, we shouldn't be doing that. No, that's not what we want. You know, sort of pitting them against the voters, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem with the way that Kemi Badenoch went about the leadership contest, frankly, because the way that she did that is that she didn't offer a diagnosis, she didn't offer any policy prescription. You know, whether you like him or dislike him, Robert Jenrick ran for the leader on things like the ECHR, and if he'd won, the MPs would have had no excuse because he'd have a mandate. Whereas Kemi, what she said was, I don't know what the problems are, but I'm an engineer, I know how to find them. And that let her scoop up a lot of votes, and it won her the leadership contest. But it now means that Tory MPs, a lot of them basically used her her candidacy as a snooze button, if you like, on the ideological contest that needs to happen. And so now that she is trying to make these quite big policy calls, a lot of the MPs, including mostly the MPs who supported her, they say, well, I didn't vote for Kemi Badenoch to be leader so we could leave the ECHR.
Right.
And that's the challenge that she's going to have to navigate now.
And that is the problem. And it appears, whether rightly or wrongly, it appears as well that her policy, certainly on immigration, and even their policy on saving 47 billion that Mel Stride came out with this morning on welfare and foreign aid, is very much driven by a sort of fear of reform.
Yeah, I mean, one of the funny things is that the Conservative policy review isn't meant to be over yet. According to the timetable that I had, this policy review, which was too slow. I think the Conservative Party, I've said for a while, needs policies before anyone can listen to it. But it wasn't really meant to be reporting at this point. It was meant to be next year. But what they've realised is that they need things to say, and so there are just this complete flurry of announcements. And I do worry that they're leaving some hostages to fortune. So, for example, Kemi Badenoch has said now that they've done the homework, she could answer any question about the technical detail of the plan to leave the ECHR. And when she said that, I just caught sight of a couple of the people who I knew were working on the party's ECHR report. They looked slightly horrified, because that's not what they've done. They've created the party document is about why we should leave, not how we should leave.
Right.
So they are actually rushing, and I think this is somebody trying to shore up their leadership.
Yeah, well, she's sort of covering her backside from what she said before, isn't she? Because, I mean, when I interviewed her shortly before she won the leadership contest, she was talking about, well, we'll wait and see. I'm not ruling it out, but I don't necessarily want to say I want to leave the ECHR until I've seen, how that would affect us and how much it would cost us and all of this, So she's kind of, reverse... I don't know, judging herself, if you like, by saying, well, now we've waited long enough, now I can tell her this is why we want to do it, which is not the process. The process is clearly that she's decided there's a political necessity here, and you need to say this, otherwise people are just going to walk away. In the same way that Rachel Reeves said, in early part of this year, now we can withdraw the withholding of the pensioners' fuel allowance because we've made the economy stable enough so that we can give it back. And everybody knew it was absolute rubbish.
I mean, that was incredible, because, of course, what Rachel Reeves is going to deliver in not very long now, a really extraordinarily painful budget, right? And she is going to have to come back and break her promises on tax again and again and again. And I wrote at the time, it's a bit like, okay, well, she's now said that she's fixed the economy, right? At least when she came in, she was just saying the Tories wrecked the economy. I guess I have to do all these terrible things. But is it going to be the case now that it's basically just what day of the week it is, right? Like one day when she needs to give away something that she shouldn't give away, she's like, oh, well, Labour has fixed the economy. And then the very next day she'll be back in Parliament being like, well, the Tories have ruined it. Has Mel Stride snuck into the Treasury overnight and turned the economy off? What's going on?
Yeah, well, the other thing, and I know it's a relatively small thing, but the programme for the conference itself has got a collection of Tories on the front page who are all kind of members of the shadow cabinet, but there's no Mel Stride and there's no Robert Jenrick. We had Mel Stride on this morning and he said, oh, well, the thing is, they'd arranged to do the photo shoot. I was in America talking to the man that created the Laffer curve, but you go, well, okay, but it's not a great look, is it? I mean, are you in the inner circle or are you not? You can easily rebrand the front cover. You can easily put somebody into a picture who wasn't there. You can certainly easily rearrange the photo shoot to make sure that your Shadow Chancellor and Robert Jenrick, who's a fairly key member of the Shadow team, is actually in the picture, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I would have said so. It's not as if the photographer is busier than the Shadow Chancellor, right?
No.
And there are many photographers. So it
just seems a bit amateurish,
It is a baffling decision. I mean, what I will say is at least the fact that Mel Stride isn't in it does suggest that it was literally just a refusal to rearrange the photo shoot, right? Because I think if Mel was in it and it was just Robert Jenrick who hadn't made the cut in the photo shoot, that would look a little bit like Stalin editing people out of photographs, right? So at least the non-presence of an ally suggests that that's not what it is, but it is a weird sort of excuse.
Yeah. So is there still this division in the Tory party that will show itself this weekend, or this week I should say, between those who are sort of slightly more Europhile than others, those who are slightly softer on immigration than others? Is it still riven by that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The problem, if you like, for the Conservative Party is that we didn't have this fight during the leadership contest, which we need to.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful description. The problem with that wing of the party, for that wing of the party, there's a wonderful description of the Labour right in the 1970s in a history book, which is that they had principles and they had preferences, but they had no ideas.
Right.
And the same applies to the Tory left now, right? They don't want to leave the ACHR. They don't want to massively crack down on immigration. They don't want to massively crack down on public spending and all the rest of it. But they don't have any alternative program for the party. They just know what they don't want.
Yeah.
The fact is that without either leaving or getting really quite aggressive about ignoring the ECHR, the sort of immigration control that the public wants is not possible, right? And if you want to make the case for if you want to make the case for staying in the ECHR and for obeying all of its diktats, because of course Tony Blair didn't. Britain can just ignore the ECHR, but then you need to accept that you can't deliver immigration reform. But they won't do that, right? Because that would be political suicide. So they're sort of adrift. The politics of this country has moved so far from where it was when they started out, and they haven't caught up yet.
No, and partly the reason the country has moved is because of the way that the Tories mishandled it all when they were in charge.
Oh, for sure. I mean, this is the thing, right? The tens of thousands pledge, right? Made in 2010, made again in 2015. David Cameron never even tried to hit it, right? And that was like so many things. It's one of the most frustrating things about David Cameron's premiership. He was when he was elected in 2010, he had a mandate for austerity, and the public finances were in far better state than they are now, right? Because the demographic pressures weren't as bad and all the rest of it. When he was elected, immigration was running at what, 300,000 net 300,000 a year? Do you remember those halcyon days?
Oh, yes.
When it was only 300,000 a year, right? The temperature was much, much lower. There weren't any, UKIP MPs at the time because the public still trusted the Conservatives to be this country's right-wing party. And they just consistently stuck their heads in the sand. The big problem for the Tories on immigration is that they would talk tough, and they'd appoint someone to the Home Office to talk tough. And then every single time, they'd let the Department for Education, the Department for Business, and the Treasury at the cabinet table bid up the numbers to whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
And now the public don't take the Tories seriously.
That's the problem. Henry, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Henry Hill there with his column on page 10 of The Sun today, Spotlight Time for Last Chance Kemi. And he's right. I mean, what does she do? Or what does she do if it remains as irrelevant as it currently is, the Tory party? Let's get a voice note from Lynn.
Morning, Mike. Lynn from Brighton here. Without a doubt, Kemi Badenoch's speech was probably, well, arguably, the best speech she's ever done. They're not going to do anything she says. I mean, and if they think they are, or they're willing to, no one is going to believe them, because their record on immigration is it's abysmal. So as usual, they're saying the right things, but they'll never do it. I was blue through and through, Mike. I've been Tory all my life, and after Boris let us down, and the emergence of reform and Nigel, well, I'm reform all the way now. I could never trust the Tories again, Mike. Keep the good work up, Mike. Cheers, mate.
Lynn, thanks very much indeed. I'm afraid Lynn speaks for an awful lot of people. Let's have a look at what's being said on the Sun Letters page.
Letters from the Sun, the page where you tell Britain what to think. For more, visit thesun.co.uk.
And today, it's an awful lot about Angela Rayner, who was in the papers over the weekend because her boyfriend was using the supplied car, the government-supplied car, to ferry some of his belongings between his place and her place down in Hove. Angela Rayner, says Mary in Nottinghamshire in Mansfield. Angela Rayner, the former Deputy Prime Minister, seems to think she's above the law. Having underpaid tax on her flat, I fail to see why Rayner, who quit before she could be sacked, has the use of a taxpayer-funded BMW and protection officers. It beggars belief that we, the voting public, are expected to fund this. And Zara in County Down in Ireland says, would Keir Starmer like to explain to the taxpayer why we are still paying for Angela Rayner's BMW and close protection officers? To be ferrying her lover around in the car is some cheek. Shame on both of them. And there's a lot more where that came from. So a lot of people are still asking the question, how is she getting away with it? And why is there not going to be an investigation, which is what we're told there isn't going to be? Apparently, she still deserves, as former Deputy Prime Minister, the close protection officers that she has, because there are still apparently credible threats against her life, and therefore she has the use of a car. Well, fine. But why does she get to give that to her boyfriend? That shouldn't be done, should it? 8:39.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:41. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Simon says the only way Badenoch could win anything is to make her statements in the manifesto legal for delivery. No one will believe her or generic, etc. Reformer ahead, way ahead. Well, even now, the latest poll says Nigel Farage is the person in this country who people would most like to see as the next Prime Minister. And Kemi Badenoch's name doesn't even get a look in, to be honest. But let's talk to Tony Long, former Metropolitan Police firearms officer and author of a great book, Lethal Force, My Life as the Met's Most Controversial Marksman. On Thursday, we found out that 2 people had been murdered by what was thought to be an Islamist attack at a mosque in Manchester. It turned out that one of the victims who died, sadly, had actually been shot by a police officer from an armed squad that was out there who had killed the protagonist himself and put him down on the ground, thank goodness, and very quickly. But obviously a lot of questions to be asked now about how this could have happened. Tony, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, very well indeed. I'm reluctant to have a go here at the police. A lot of people were like, how can the police have managed to kill somebody? But, I mean, obviously in something as fast-moving as that, the police are seeing this guy trying to break into a mosque. He's got a knife. He's trying to get through a door. What's the likely situation here? I mean, could they have shot him and could the bullet have gone through him and then through the door? Is that possible?
Well, there's basically 2 options, isn't there? Either they fired and missed, and, you know, actual human beings are quite mobile. They'd have had to go for a headshot. If they'd seen the explosive vest, they would have been looking to take a critical shot to the brainstem.
Right.
The head is a small movable target. It's quite possible that they missed. The other thing, as you quite rightly said, is that they might have fired and the round has over-penetrated and struck the and struck the member of the congregation on the other side of the door.
Yeah, we're just watching the scene outside the synagogue here, and unusually it was all kind of captured on film, as a lot of these things obviously are nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the velocity of the bullet that they're using would have the capability of going through all of that, right?
Well, the problem is we used to use 9mm, which is essentially a handgun round, and without getting overly complicated, that travels about 800 foot per second. But because of Paris, because of all of the other terrorist attacks around the country, they still carry a 9mm pistol, but the carbine they carry is universally, and designated across the country, is in 5.56mm, which is a much faster round. It travels about 2,500 foot per second or more. But it's very flat, and it means that they can engage a suicide bomber outside of the blast area of the bomb. So they could have taken a critical shot at his head at 50-odd meters. I doubt that's very much the case in this instance.
Right.
But because of the extra velocity, there is always a danger of penetration.
Yes. And so because of the speed, as you say, that could, the door presumably was not, I mean, thankfully they were able to barricade the door, but the door may not have been particularly thick, and so therefore the bullet could quite easily have gone through it.
Can I tell a very quick story here? And it actually it explains what I'm talking about here. Just after this happened, I got loads of phone calls saying, could you speak on the radio programmes, and colleagues are saying, have you seen what's happened in Manchester? And I got online and I saw the footage that we're seeing now, only I saw the unedited version, which was far more unpleasant to watch. And of course, all you see in that footage is, for want of a better word, the coup de grace, because the man that was down starts to get up again.
Right.
And so we don't see the initial shots.
Right.
But then a journalist sent me a picture, which everyone will probably seen now, of the suspect standing at the front of the building.
Yeah.
Where you can quite clearly see a suicide vest. And the question I was asked was, does it look to you like he's wearing body armor? So I looked very, very closely at the photograph, and I saw that he appeared to have a suicide vest. I couldn't see any trace of body armor. I looked at his head, and I simply text back, I don't think he's got body armor on. It wasn't until 2 days later that I looked at that photograph again, knowing what we all know now, and saw that the faces, it's quite haunting faces of the congregation at those tiny windows right next to the suspect.
Right.
Now, I'd looked at that picture with a cup of coffee in my hand, sitting on a sofa, at my leisure. No adrenaline flowing. I hadn't just driven through heavy traffic. But the reality is that while police officers need to be aware of their backdrop, if you're focusing on somebody who you think is about to detonate at any moment, you probably won't pick up tiny nuances. I hadn't seen it, and I put this online, and people have come back and go, "Oh my God! Now that you mention it, I can see their faces."
Yeah.
So it's being out there on the day is very, very different to looking at it, as we do now.
Also, what you can see is not necessarily what they can see, because obviously they're further away. They're not looking at.
And of course, if you think someone's about to detonate imminently, you don't have the option to change the angle. You couldn't move 10 meters to the right and take the shot. Even if you thought there was people behind, you have to take it imminently, immediately. Otherwise, he's going to detonate and kill everyone.
Yeah. And what will happen now to the individual who would have made that shot?
Well, obviously, my thoughts, are with the Jewish community and with the family. But obviously, because of my background, my thoughts are also, with the officers, because I've been in that position. Thankfully, not the position they're in, but I have had to take life, and I hope upon hope that the IOPC actually accept the fact that these people, these officers, were extremely brave. They ran towards what they thought was a suicide bomber, did what they thought was the right thing. Tragedy ensued, but really the only person to blame for this is the
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I absolutely wanted to make that very clear. I don't want to come on this programme and pretend that it's the fault of the police. He was there. If it wasn't for him being there, this wouldn't have happened. And so plainly and simply, he's the one to blame. Absolutely right. Tony, listen, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for clearing that up for us. Former Metropolitan Police, our firearms officer, giving us a bit of context as to what it's like for these police officers firing into what can often be a very hostile environment where a guy is about to blow himself up and they have really no choice but to take the shot. and it's not always easy to guarantee what happens after that. So while, yes, of course, it's an awful tragedy for the family, I think it's rough to blame the police for what is obviously something that they have to do in order to neutralise somebody that they saw as an incredible danger, and that was that man Jihadi. Let's get a voice note from Stuart on Gary Neville.
Hiya Mike, Stuart from Wigan. Spoke Gary Neville. I mean, I'm a United fan. I've never liked him. He's always been arrogant. He's always been and I'll finish there, but at the end of the day, he's picked his side. Well, it's all right, because you pick wrong side, Cobb, and sooner or later you're going to find that out, and it will be sooner.
Yeah, I think so, Stuart. Thanks very much indeed. This from David. The arrest at pro-Palestinian hate marches is just gaslighting. How many arrested people actually face any charges, let alone jail time? Mostly just given a warning and let go. Yeah, but it is very, very disruptive to the police's general day-to-day operations, because they still have to go through the motions of charging them and then bringing them back after releasing them on bail, and either cautioning them or putting them through a court process of some kind or another. Absolutely right. Dave from Hampshire asks a good question. He says, morning, Mike. Regarding Gary Neville's comments, does that make him racist, sexist and ageist? I find his comments offensive being in that group. There would be uproar if it was another ethnic group that he spoke about. Yeah, imagine if he came out and said, you know, here's the thing. The problem in this country is all caused by young brown men as opposed to white old men. Why would that be somehow any different? I don't think it would be. Angry white men. What about angry brown men? What's the difference? Why is he not being done? It's a good question. 10 minutes to 9.
Extraordinary that she just didn't seem to care whether or not her dad was alive or dead. And as I said, her brother, Thomas Markle Jr., he made no bones about his feelings about that.
I've been off for years for what she did to my dad. On this day, the day after the earthquake, is there a phone call? Is there a text? No, there's not. And I'm not going to be the guy who just sits here and just, you know, makes his whole YouTube show about ranting and raving about a worthless walking the planet who claims that she's God's gift to the world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is Morning Glory with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. It's nearly 9 o'clock already. It's 7 minutes to 9. We've been here since 6, of course, every single weekday morning from 6 a.m. to 10. The home of common sense, the one place we need to get the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. French Prime Minister just resigned. Hang on. He's only been in a couple of days, hasn't he? A couple of hours, maybe? His name is Sébastien Lecornu. He's resigned. I don't know why. After less than a month in the job. It's all going a bit wrong in France, isn't it? Blimey, absolutely incredible. We've been talking about Gary Neville an awful lot this morning. Time to now go back to something that we talk about quite a lot more than that, generally speaking, and it's all about cyclists, actually. Tom Fyans joins us. He's the CEO of the London Cycling Campaign. A strange story came out last week. We didn't really get to do it, so I thought we should revisit it. It's basically that police have said that they won't investigate if your car or bike is stolen from a railway station if it happened more than 2 hours ago. Seems a bit weird, doesn't it? Let's find out what's going on. Tom, very good morning to you.
Morning. Hi, Mike.
Yeah, good to see you. Obviously, an awful lot of people park their bikes at railway stations. I mean, I'm slightly smarting from the old crime wave of Britain at the moment. The back windscreen of my car was smashed in last week and I had to get it fixed. But what's all this? The police saying they won't investigate if your bike is stolen from a railway station if it's more than 2 hours ago. I mean, my understanding from talking to people in the big wide world these days is that they don't investigate it much anyway.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, you couldn't really make it up. I mean, bike theft, 98% of bikes stolen in London are just, never found. Yeah. There's no real success rate. So the idea that the police are now going to actually just anything over 2 hours at stations where people actually leave their bikes there for the day sometimes if they're commuters, it's crazy. I mean, it's going in the opposite direction. We need more help, not less, really.
Yeah. And what's their justification for this? Have they not got enough police? Have they not got enough CCTV? I mean, usually most of these stations are covered in CCTV cameras, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, the CCTV is there. There's one bike place in Watford, I think it had 30 cameras at a station. So that's not really the issue. I think what they're saying is that they haven't got time to go through it. It's not a good use of their time, if you like. So they're just sort of deprioritising it. And I think just sending the wrong message, saying basically that to criminals, to bike thieves, you're going to have a free run. Free.
But that's the trouble, isn't it? When this kind of story comes out, you just get the idea that, well, so nobody cares. I mean, some of the most dangerous places to park your car are railway station car parks, even though, they might have cameras there, because people know that, as you say, nobody will bother following up on it.
No, yeah, they're hotspots. Train stations, unfortunately, they are prime hotspots, and cars and bikes are vulnerable. I mean, yeah, it seems ridiculous of all the places to sort of, you're saying to bike, cyclists, leave your bike here. It's a sensible place to leave it. They need to leave it there, but actually, what we're going to do is leave it open to being stolen.
Yeah. I mean, what's the sort of the scene in places like the centre of London or the centre of Manchester? I mean, are bikes getting stolen from those places as well?
Yeah, I mean, stations are particularly vulnerable, but in London, there's kind of up to 200 bikes a day are being stolen at the moment, if you include burglaries in that. So, a lot of people are losing their bike. And the thing is, you stop cycling. I mean, people can't necessarily afford to replace a bike if it gets nicked. And about 25% of people stop cycling if they have their bike stolen. So, we want to encourage cycling. It's good for you. It's very healthy. It's good for the environment. So it just feels like in London particularly, it's going crazy at the moment. There are a lot of cyclists, and it's a good thing.
And do the bikes disappear, or do they just get used by the person that nicked them? Do they get resold? Because, I mean, the other problem here is there must be people buying stolen bikes if there's a demand for them.
Yeah, there's a real racket. I mean, if they're particularly expensive bikes, they get shipped on, they can get moved out of the country if they're worth a lot of money. But even your kind of average street bike, £200-300 bike, is getting, you have it nicked and it'll appear in a market somewhere that, or online straight away. And that's the problem. There's
But that's the problem then. That means that people buying these bikes are effectively, aiding and abetting a criminal enterprise.
Yeah, I mean, people should really be ask where they're getting this bike from. If they're getting it on Gumtree and it's 50 quid, it's bound to be suspect, to be honest. And people need to be a little bit more savvy and a bit more kind of, a bit more savvy about it, really.
Well, maybe you should get registrations on them, as I've always been banging on about, and maybe you could track them a bit more. Let me ask you about another story that's in the Mail today. Number of cyclists injuring pedestrians has hit an all-time high, apparently. Police recorded 603 accidents where a civilian was injured in a bike collision last year. That's up from 2023, 19%. I blame the way the roads have been redesigned, you know, because particularly in London, I see people all the time stepping off a bus in one of these traffic islands and then walking to the right and then suddenly getting hit by a guy on a bike.
I mean, well, London streets really are designed for cars. They're not really been designed for bikes, and that's one of the problems, that there are these workarounds and, you know, lanes and things where it's not ideal, certainly for cyclists and pedestrians. So yeah, I mean, look, cyclists need to behave responsibly if they want respect on the road. It needs to go both ways. I get that, but pedestrians much more likely to be hurt and injured by a car than a bike, to be honest.
They are, yeah, but I mean, they're not so much now because the cars go so slowly in so many parts of London. But, you know, somebody needs to talk to Sadiq Khan, because he won't talk to us, and tell him to sharpen it all up a bit, I think. Would you do that for us?
Yeah, I'd love to talk to Sadiq Khan, actually, about lots of things. I mean, he's got a lot on at the moment, but yeah, it's really important that people can move around the city safely.
It is, absolutely. Tom, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Tom Fyans there, CEO of the London Cycling Campaign. We've got loads to do coming up in the next hour. We're going to talk some more about Gary Neville and what a plonker he is. I think he's a shoo-in for Plank of the Week this week. Also, we'll be finding out precisely why it is that Keir Starmer's going off to India. What's he doing there? Let's just talk.
My message to people smugglers is this. I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Smash the gangs. Smash the people smuggling gangs.
People smuggling puns.
He couldn't even smash an avocado for a piece of toast.
Or the people... What would that... The people...
I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Well, it might be if you smashed any, if you found any.
The people smash... Those... The smash...
And he hasn't smashed anything. I mean, literally all he does is he smashes records every sort of couple of weeks, where more and more people come in a period of 24 hours.
Smash the gangs that are running this vile trade.
You're never going to smash the gangs. That's something that basically is impossible. The gangs are like the Hydra. You cut the head off and another two grow.
So I did write to ministers and say that I wasn't convinced that smashing the gangs was the right sort of way of thinking about things.
We will smash the gangs that undermine our security.
Keir Starmer has just tweeted 15 minutes ago. He says, "I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source." Maybe I'll just read it all in his accent, shall I?
There is no return to freedom of movement. We have left the EU. I do not accept that prevents us working with other police units here, with prosecutors here, to smash the gangs.
Well, sure, the smuggling gangs are absolutely quaking in their boots now. Keir Starmer is on their case. Solving this issue, smashing the gangs, is that the impossible dream, Tom?
It really seems beyond him at the minute, I have to say.
We're going to get the evil people smugglers and we're going to smash them and we're going to put them in jail. That will solve the migrant crisis.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer's promise to smash the gangs has resulted in just 5 convictions. Hurrah for operating small boats.
So what he really wants to say is that this policy of smashing the gangs is a total and utter disaster. There isn't a cat in hell's chance that it's going to work. You just can't say it.
It's crap. That's what he's basically saying.
I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. Mark my words, I will take back control of our borders. That means cutting migration, ending the use of asylum hotels and ramping up our efforts to stop small boat crossings.
It's like a parallel universe, the real world, as told by the impressive David Bolt, and Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' fantasy world.
We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to 3 minutes past 9. Here with you for another hour, of course. Julie Hartley-Graham will be along at 10 o'clock to take you through until 1. And then, of course, it will be Ian Collins, then Jeremy Kyle, then, of course, the political asylum, Kevin O'Sullivan from 7 till 10. Coming up, the Morning Glory podcast will be out shortly after this show finishes around 10:15, 10:30. Lots of you got things to say about Gary Neville this morning. He's made the front pages and many of the pages inside talking about angry white middle-aged men who are to blame for all division in this world. Apparently, he's not that worried about crazed Islamists going around with knives, stabbing people on the streets of Manchester, killing Jewish people just because they're Jewish. He's not concerned about them, no. He's far more concerned about angry middle-aged white men who know exactly what they are doing. He said in this rather bizarre rant, which he put out on social media yesterday. He doesn't like flags. He doesn't like people having a go at anybody else. He says we're all being divided by angry white middle-aged men. Here's what Carl has to say about it.
Hi, Mike. Carl in Barry. Just want to comment on Gary Neville and what he said yesterday. Absolutely disgusting. So it's my fault. I'm a white, middle-aged British man, and I have a Union Jack in my garden. So it's my fault, is it, what happened last week in Eaton Park Synagogue? How disgusting and how disrespectful to the people that passed away or suffered. Not just that, not one mention of what the real problem is, which is Islamic terrorism. No, it's all the fault of a middle-aged white British man because he put flags up on a lamppost.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? An awful lot of flack coming Gary Neville's way. There's also a boycott being threatened by some people of Sky Sports, who say they don't want to see him commentating on any games anymore because he clearly doesn't like the people that support football, an awful lot of whom are white middle-aged men. Not necessarily angry, just sometimes when their team loses. You know, that's all right. OK, we've got loads more stories to do. We've got Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary. She's come out and basically said she wants to give police more powers. That's on the front page of the Times, to stop more protests from taking place. My fear is that it won't stop the pro-Palestine protests. It may well mean that she will also stop other protests that she doesn't like. For example, outside migrant hotels. For example, people who want to fly the flag and have patriotic marches around London to prove why they love their country. It's all a bit messy. Meanwhile, we've got Conservative Party conference. Jack Elsom's here, political editor of The Sun. He's up there in Manchester. We'll ask him how relevant Kemi Badenoch is and whether any of the things that she says she wants to do will ever come to pass. 03444991000. The French Prime Minister's resigned after less than a month in the job. And there's a big row going on about China and a spy problem. We'll tell you all about that as well. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. This, of course, coming in from Paul in London. Mike, I cancelled my Sky Sports Now TV account last night. Gary has to go. He lives in a safe, secure home while putting a target on white men's backs. We all know there are dangerous people out there who could see this as a green light. This is inciting hatred and it is unacceptable, says Paul. Those are strong words. And one from Scott in Dorset. Gary Neville himself is white, middle-aged and always quite angry. Is he saying he was at fault? He was an annoying pillock as a player, and he remains an annoying pillock now. I think people like him saying these kinds of things is probably not helpful. Paul in Fife says this. Morning, Mike. How can Sky Sports and other football broadcasters continue to employ Neville after his comments about England flag wavers? The majority of football fans in England are middle-aged white men, you total plonker. This guy's worse than Lineker. Well, interestingly enough, we'll play you probably a bit of it. Keir Starmer's sort of pinned tweet now is all about her Labour Party conference as it took place last week, of course, before the Tories this week. And his pinned tweet says it's basically all about fairness. And he says it's all about a Britain built for all. And in that video, there's loads and loads of pictures of people waving flags. Is Gary Lineker going to object to that? I wouldn't have thought so. He doesn't seem to like it. We shall see. Let's go up to Manchester now. Jack Elsom's there, political editor at The Sun. Jack, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Conference is down. Last one to go.
Yes, you should get a medal for all of this at the end of the day. You've got to eat bad food for sort of weeks on end. I never thought, though, that the Tory Party conference would be overshadowed by a football commentator in the likes of Gary Neville. He's getting an awful lot of flack from our viewers this morning.
I'm not surprised. I think that ordinary, decent, patriotic people will be absolutely sick to death at being sneered at by lovey, multi-millionaire celebrities. Gary Neville is just the latest in a long line of celebrities to come out and trash ordinary working people. And for Gary Neville, you know, someone that was happy to wear the England colours when he ran out at Wembley, when he used to actually play for England, it's okay for him to fly the flag, but actually for ordinary people in this country, apparently that's not allowed. And, you know, I think what's been really nice about the past few weeks is that many people have found themselves finally able to actually fly the England flag, the British flag in their streets, because for so long they feared being tarnished as racists and the rest of it. But actually, it's nothing to do with race whatsoever. It's to do with pride in your country, no matter what colour you are. And I think for Gary Neville to, you know, sneer at people, I think is totally inappropriate, especially from the position of privilege which he comes from.
Yeah, and he's also quite closely aligned to Andy Burnham in Manchester. I mean, the two of them are sort of cheek by jowl mates. They seem to hang out quite a lot together. They seem to, you know, you get the impression anyway that Andy Burnham sort of advises Gary Neville on what he might want to say politically. So, I mean, is he maybe causing some problems here for Andy Burnham?
Well, potentially, because I think the Labour Party know deep down that these are their voters, right? And if they want any chance of winning the next election, it's these people they're going to have to win back. Yeah. And clearly, at the moment, Keir Starmer has made a calculation that, you know, he has to, you know, get on with, you know, waving his flag, show pride in your country, because that's what most people want to see. You're always going to have people on the fringes that are repelled by the idea of our national standards because they associate it bizarrely with basically racism and the sort of the far right sort of EDL movement. But for most people, it's the total opposite of that. It is a symbol of unity, no matter where you come from in this country, no matter what of your background. If you are British, if you are English, then you can all rally behind the same flag. And, you know, Labour do realise that, I think, and you saw a lot of flag waving at the Labour Party conference. And for Gary Neville, he seems to be on the total wrong side of this one.
He does. Let's have a quick look at what he actually said about these angry white men.
I was driving home from Salford City last night. I was driving actually to Salford City, going down a Littleton Road, seeing 60, probably 50 or 60 Union Jack flags. And I just kept thinking as I was driving home last night that we're all being turned on each other. And the division that's being created is absolutely disgusting. Mainly created by angry, middle-aged white men who know exactly what they're doing.
Yes. So anyway, I guess, you know, we'll see how that all ends up for Gary Neville. Let's talk a bit about the state of the Conservative Party. You're up there, Jack. We were just talking to Henry Hill, who's written a piece about how this is kind of Kemi Badenoch's last stand, if you like. You know, they're saying an awful lot of things. They're throwing a lot of things out there, like red meat, but even their own party isn't agreeing with an awful lot of it.
Yeah, this is the problem now for Kemi Badenoch. It's so difficult. You know, back in the day, when we had a big two-party system, you would just know who your enemy is, Tories versus Labour, and you could sort of jockey over the centre ground. The problem for Kemi Badenoch now is that she's really fighting on two fronts. She's got Nigel Farage, who she's bleeding votes to on her rightward flank, and she's got Keir Starmer, obviously, the incumbency, to her left. And so where does she go? Where is the ground which she can fight on and get clear blue water and an opening with both sides? Clearly she has to go toe-to-toe with Nigel Farage on something like migration to show she is serious about getting a grip of our borders, both illegal and legal. But if you are totally incensed, as many people are, by the high levels of migration in this country, then you probably are going to be more enthused by the Reform Party, because Nigel Farage clearly has been talking about this for a long time and doesn't have all of the baggage which the Tories do of 14 years. So I think that really Kemi Badenoch now, and it's plastered all over this conference hall, is going to be talking more about the economy, the Tories' sort of more comfortable turf. She's going to be, Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor, is out today talking about sound money and finances, because their calculation, the Tory party, is that Reform are making pretty big spending commitments. Labour obviously going to be putting up taxes as expected in the budget, and so the opening for them, they see, is sort of getting back to that fiscal discipline, spending restraints, and that's why you're seeing Mel Stride today come out and talk about benefit cuts, overseas aid cuts, shrinking the size of the civil service, getting rid of some of the net zero schemes. The problem is, Mike, is that whether that will actually turn the dial remains to be seen, because many people currently aren't listening. And when you get into that position where you are now the third party in the polls, way behind Labour, way behind Reform, it's very, very difficult to cut through.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? I mean, there's a new poll that came out last night, you'll have seen, from JLP Partners saying for the first time who you think would make the better Prime Minister, and now it's Nigel Farage, and it was only in March that Keir Starmer had a 10-point lead over Nigel Farage, and it was the one thing that Labour were kind of clinging to, saying, yeah, but at least people still have faith in Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. Well, not anymore. It's now 35% Nigel Farage, 34% Keir Starmer, don't know 31%, but Kemi Badenoch's name doesn't even feature.
Yeah, you're right. It's so difficult for Kemi Badenoch at the moment. I mean, you know, there's two schools of thoughts really, I think, here up in Manchester. The first one is that if you come to the conclusion, as many members and MPs are, that Kemi Badenoch is not going to be Prime Minister, is it better to manoeuvre now and try and unseat her, and so another leader has about 3 or 4 years to bed in and get to be known by the public? The second school of thought is that the Conservative Party, one of the main reasons it got kicked out of office last time was just the sheer instability and infighting and machinations that went on for the best part of 5 years. And so changing leader again would just make them look even more ridiculous than they already are and could sink even lower. And so this is really what the Conservative Party is now grappling with. Kemi Badenoch, I think to her credit, is trying to make the case, which is, you know, give me some time. You know, leaders cannot change things overnight. We had our worst election defeat in a generation the last time around, and for anyone to be able to revive those fortunes so quickly would be asking too much. And also she goes, think about where Keir Starmer was back in 2021 when Boris Johnson was walking on water, could do no wrong. Nobody thought he could be Prime Minister, and 4 years later, obviously, he managed to get into number 10. But the problem for Kemi Badenoch is that she's fighting on two fronts, and it's just so difficult now when there's that squeezed middle ground which she's trying to fight on. To get any sort of cut through and to get any sort of salience is very, very tricky.
And as soon as she says anything which is perceived to be on the right of the Conservative Party, a whole load of Tories come out and say, oh, I don't think we want to do that, like the ECHR pronouncement, and then also similarly, you know, deporting 150,000 people a year. You know, there's a lot of Tories who don't feel as though that is what they regard as the new Tory party.
Totally. The Conservative Party has always been a broad church, but you have to think about what's left in the membership now of the Conservative Party, because some people have gone to Reform. Most people haven't gone to Labour or the Lib Dems, and so you are left with a pretty big rump in the Conservative Party membership of what we used to call the traditional Tory wets. You know, the people like, you know, David Gauke and Dominic Grieve, the people to whom leaving the ECHR would be absolutely, you know, incomprehensible and repellent, and now they are signed up to a policy which would take them out of it, and they're rallying under that leader. Even people within the shadow cabinet, you think about people like James Cleverly, the shadow housing secretary, or Victoria Atkins, the shadow environment secretary, who in the past have come from that one nation perspective and have totally ruled out leaving the European Court of Human Rights. And so for them now, it must be a pretty uncomfortable position to essentially be presented by Kemi Badenoch with the fait accompli that we are going to be leaving the ECHR. So there is clearly a big difference in the Conservative Party. There's always been big differences in any party, but when you can get away with it more in government, being a broad church, because you have a clear direction in a clear government, and yes, you might get fickle backbenchers, but when you're trying to put actually a case as a united party across the country, it's difficult if you have splits.
It is. Tomorrow is the anniversary of October 7th, the second anniversary of what that awful day was in 2023. Keir Starmer, in his wisdom, decided to go to India. Apparently, according to one report, to visit Prime Minister Modi and to reaffirm the shared vision of India and the UK. I mean, he's going to get accused of just not being here again, isn't he?
Yeah, so I think the plan is for him to fly out late tomorrow night, and so I think you probably can expect him to mark the October 7th anniversaries in some way. I mean, by the way, it seems at the moment, from my count, there's no less than 10 of these hate marches going on tomorrow, the pro-Palestine marches. Yeah. So I think ministers are going to come under enormous amounts of pressure to call these things out. You know, we saw some big overtures by the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood yesterday about banning these repeat protests. You know, it's time now for them to put their money where their mouth is and really call out marches that are happening on the anniversary of that horrendous atrocity in Israel. And so I think that you can probably expect to be some words from the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary and the like. The Prime Minister's going to India. You know, it's all about forging trade ties. What I would really want, I think, from the Prime Minister over there is to talk about the immigration problem, because you will remember, Mike, that the first migrant in the one in, one out deal, we sent back, who came over in a small boat to France, was an Indian migrant.
Right.
And that is because we couldn't deport them to India. Now, if we're going to be doing all this trade with India, I think most viewers would probably want to know why India are not taking back their illegal migrants that that have come over here on small boats. So maybe the Prime Minister could talk to Narendra Modi about that as well.
Right, because they seem to have a deal with France. So we sent them to France, and then the French sent him to India under part of their new deal. So it seems mad, given that we've also promised India all sorts of tax breaks to bring businesses into this country and employ people from India. I mean, it doesn't seem. I mean, again, it seems like one-way traffic, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, the whole India trade deal at the time did raise concerns, because what it would mean is that, you know, essentially it would be cheaper for companies to hire Indian workers over here because they wouldn't have to pay national insurance. Yes, there is a quid pro quo where if a British worker went over to India, likewise, they wouldn't have to pay national insurance. But at a time where, you know, we're trying to get people off welfare and into, you know, and into the workplace, British people, so they're less reliant on benefits. People might think that, you know, that is a bit of a funny one. You know, he's got Keir Starmer as well. He's trying to strike this Indian trade deal. The people in the Treasury, Rachel Reeves, various other ministers and officials, believe that trade deals are the answer to their growth problem, whether that is with America, whether that is with India, less friction with the EU. And so that is why they are making big plays about trying to go over there and strike these deals. They've got a massive black hole coming up in the budget, about £30 billion by some counts, and so they see growth as the answer to that. But the history of this is that trade deals, sometimes they can make a bit of difference, but in terms of like massively putting rocket boosters under the economy, sometimes they don't really work that way.
One final one for you, Jack. This incredible story about the Chinese spying scandal. The question is China friend or foe? Jonathan Powell is facing calls to appear before Parliament. He's Starmer's national security advisor, a very senior man, worked very closely with Tony Blair back in the day. He may be called before Parliament to explain why charges have been dropped against 2 British men. How big a scandal is this?
I think it's a big scandal brewing, and as with most scandals, Mike, as you know, it's often the cover-up rather than the actual crime, which is the undoing of people. And, you know, for Jonathan Powell not to come to the bar of the House of Commons and answer questions or at Select Committee, I think is beyond the pale. You know, this is a man who wields enormous power and influence in Keir Starmer's government. He's the National Security Advisor, and just because he's a political appointment, Downing Street seem to believe that is a good enough excuse for him not to be accountable. You know, he sits in the National Security Committee. He's one of the Prime Minister's inner circle, and for him, who allegedly was part of this meeting to essentially collapse this Chinese spying trial by saying that China is not an enemy because they don't want to offend Beijing, to whom they have been getting much, much closer in the past year. He should come before the House of Commons and lay out exactly the situation. We saw Shabana Mahmood yesterday sort of give a half denial, but not really, about whether she knew or was aware that this meeting took place. So yes, I think that MPs, especially Tory MPs who wield powers on select committees, will be wanting to question Jonathan Powell.
It's going to run for a while, this one, I think. Jack, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Jack Elson, political editor of The Sun, up in Manchester at Tory Party conference, where there's all manner of things going on, but the question is anybody listening, and does anybody actually care? I suspect the answer to that collectively from people listening to this show will be not really. Let's get a voice note from Becky.
Hi Mike, it's Becky here from Yorkshire. Great show as always. I was just wondering, these 490 odd pro-Palestinian protesters that were arrested, are they going to have swift justice, going through the courts, being put in prison? I wonder.
Yeah. What is it, the full force of the law they should be facing? Is that what you're saying? Because that's what Keir Starmer likes to sort of put his marker down on, doesn't he? They will face the full force. In fact, let's hear it. Let's see him calling out the far-right thuggery during the Southport riots last year. So we see if we can get anything similar from him on the Palestinian protesters.
I won't shy away from calling it what it is. Far-right thuggery. To those who feel targeted because of the colour of your skin or your faith, I know how frightening this must be. I want you to know that this violent mob do not represent our country, and we will bring them to justice.
See, if you just use that last bit, if you're frightened because of your faith, We will take these violent people and we will bring them to justice. That's what he said. He also says that they will face the full force of the law. But unfortunately, it doesn't refer to the pro-Palestinian demonstrators who quite like fighting the police and who did fight the police last weekend and who have been arrested in their hundreds. It only applies to far-right thuggery, apparently, because he won't hesitate to call that out. But he will hesitate to call out far-left thuggery, and he will hesitate to call out anti-Semitic thuggery. Why? I just wonder why. Perhaps we can find an answer somewhere. Coming next, Gideon Falter joins us, Chief Executive of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. He might be able to help us with why Keir Starmer doesn't want to call it out, because I can.
We're going to clear away all of the legal obstacles that stop the government deporting people who arrive here illegally, for example by small boat or other illegal immigrants, and the legal obstacles that prevent the deportation of dangerous foreign criminals. Now that starts with leaving the ECHR. It's also things like banning asylum claims from people that come here illegally, getting rid of the immigration tribunal where some of the judges have histories as open borders activists, ending immigration legal aid, banning judicial review for most immigration matters.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:27. This from Anna in Surrey. So the bollards at Christmas markets is to protect us all from angry white middle-aged men. Well, now I know. Thanks to Gary Lineker. Yeah, that's true. Brad in Cambridge. Morning, Mike. All of society's problems are caused by angry middle-aged white men, says an angry middle-aged white man who was made a millionaire by mainly middle-aged white men. I'm sick of these virtue signalling celebs, says Brad in Cambridge. Yeah, I know, absolutely right. But I was asking you why earlier, you know, Keir Starmer doesn't seem willing to condemn, in the same way that he condemns far-right thuggery, the pro-Palestinian marches. We're going to speak to Gideon Falter now, Chief Executive of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Just before we do that, let me play you this. This was him on BBC over the weekend, calling out the BBC and finding, surprisingly, a bit of pushback from the BBC on anti-Semitism. Here it is.
In your statement today, you singled out the BBC. And in your statement, you said it's the bias and moral collapse of the broadcaster that has essentially turned them into spokespeople for Hamas. You can't seriously think that the BBC is a mouthpiece for Hamas.
Unfortunately, I do, and it's not just me. We do polling of the Jewish community, and over 92% now of British Jews feel that the BBC's coverage of matters of Jewish interest is unfavourable. But on the Hamas point specifically, first of all, the BBC can't bring itself to call Hamas a terrorist organisation. Secondly, we've had the BBC actually sending money.
But we don't label certain groups. We've never done that. I mean, the policy goes back decades. It was the same with the IRA. It was the same with the Taliban. It's not specific to Hamas.
Thing is that you're happy to call Jihad al-Shami a terrorist, and the terror attack in Manchester yesterday.
It's not part of a group.
I mean, I found that quite extraordinary. I don't know about you guys, but Gideon's here. Gideon, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I watched that last night. Just as you know, as you do, you come across these things. I was absolutely staggered. I mean, I know Christian Fraser. I mean, he used to work for me many years ago. I was quite surprised by how sort of aggressive he got when you started telling him a few home truths about the way the BBC operates.
Well, I mean, he did ask, didn't he? But the fact of the matter is, everybody, you know, it's become a running joke in the country. People do not think that the BBC is impartial on most things anymore.
No.
On matters of concern to the Jewish community, you rarely get, you know, people who know the Jewish community will know, you rarely get Jews agreeing on things to the extent that they now do on the BBC. 92% of British Jews find that the BBC is unfavourable on matters of Jewish interest. And you just have to look at, you know, Gary Lineker's infamous repost depicting Zionists as rats. You've got the BBC actually sent money to the family of the Hamas terrorist and had to admit that they've done that. You've got the chance of death from the stage at Glastonbury after a rant about working for effing Zionists. And the thing is, you know, now that we've actually got dead Jews in pools of blood outside a synagogue, how has that aged? How has that aged? You know, the BBC saying, "Oh, you know, we shouldn't, we didn't realise at the time. It took us 5 hours to realise that the chance for death shouldn't be broadcast into people's homes." And now you've actually got dead Jews on the ground. The BBC should have known this all along. They did know it all along. They just don't care. And I think that's what I have to come to the conclusion with the BBC, because they're a little bit like the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, completely self-righteous, completely convinced that they cannot possibly be perpetrating the spreading of racism and extremism. And yet, day after day, there is this drumbeat that British Jews feel coming from the BBC and some others in the media, but largely the BBC, where there's this drumbeat constantly, where we're hearing about babies and genocides and famines and apartheid, and it's just not borne out by the evidence. And the BBC is unfortunately complicit in this boiling hot atmosphere of incitement that has led to dead Jews on the streets of Britain.
Yeah. And it's the little things as well. It was like when he said, for example, "Oh yeah, well we called you know, jihadi al-Shami a terrorist because he's not part of a group." Well, first of all, you don't know that he's part of a group because they seem to have arrested some other people in addition to killing him. And so does that mean they don't register groups as terrorist groups, even though they're prescribed by various governments around the world? And I was watching Laura Kunsberg yesterday, and she described the killing by this man Jihad al-Shami. She described him as a British man. And yeah, he had British citizenship, but surely the point of the story is that he came from Syria. And originally that was where his father came from. His father also is somebody who was on record praising the October the 7th attacks.
And that's actually something which really frustrated me about that interview. Just before I came on that BBC interview, they had just been talking about how Faraj al-Shami, the father of Jihad al-Shami, had issued a statement distancing himself from what his son had done and saying that it was horrendous and making out that he was pretty much a good guy.
Right.
This was hours and hours after all of the other outlets had started saying, actually, Faraj al-Shami had praised the October 7th medieval murder, rape, torture, and brutality, and kidnappings. And, you just look at the BBC and think, this is an organisation which touts things like BBC Verify. The BBC doesn't really seem to verify very much at all when it comes to its coverage on Israel, and instead it just repeats lies. I remember, not so long ago, we had someone on the BBC saying that unless Israel did this and this, 14,000 babies would die in 48 hours. And when that was completely debunked, the BBC, they don't challenge it at the time. They don't apologise for it afterwards. They just plough on and bring on the next spokesperson for Hamas.
Well, one of the worst things I witnessed, and I think it was probably in the first year before even the first anniversary of 2007, the October 7th rather, was Jeremy Bowen. Who used to be, a highly respected, senior foreign correspondent for the BBC, who now appears to have been completely captured. I saw him interviewing a Hamas leader, and at the end of the interview, he gets up and gives the guy a hug, right? And then he also reported, you might remember, the so-called rocket from an Israeli shell which hit a hospital, killing 500 people. Turned out not only was there not a rocket fired, but it was a rocket that came from a jihadi group which misfired, and it didn't land in the hospital, it didn't kill 500 people, it landed in the car park. He then said in an interview to one of the, I think it was Hard Talk, he said, yeah, I got that wrong, and they said, do you regret that? He said, no. I don't regret it because, the whole point about it is Israel is doing terrible things in Gaza. And you go, well, so you're happy to get it wrong. You're not sorry you got it wrong. And the context of why you're not sorry is because Israel's doing terrible things. It's not really journalism, is it?
No, it's activism. And you just have to look, not even... a lot of this stuff predates the October 7th attack. If you look at the BBC's coverage, there was an attack on Oxford Street in London. There were some Jewish teenagers who were there for Hanukkah, and they were minding their own business when suddenly they got attacked by a mob of young men. And they'd arrived on a bus, and they managed to run back onto their bus and drive away. And this was all captured on video and circulated on social media. And the BBC said that they uniquely could hear the Jewish teenagers shouting anti-Muslim slurs. Literally everybody listened to this footage. We had sound experts deconstruct the footage in order to be able to figure out exactly what was said by whom. There was no anti-Muslim slur, and eventually the BBC had to admit they'd made it up. They said that they'd misheard it. It was but along the way, the BBC had been completely belligerent. At first, they said that anti-Muslim slurs, plural, could be clearly heard. Then they said, no, actually, it was just one anti-Muslim slur. Then they said, actually, it couldn't be clearly heard. It went through multiple levels of complaint. Eventually, Ofcom had to weigh in as well, which is quite rare. The BBC is unique amongst broadcasters in that it's allowed to self-regulate. And it's just absolutely appalling behaviour that once we get past October 7th, just ramps up. And the BBC, as I said, unfortunately has become an institution of complete moral collapse, which has become essentially a mouthpiece for Hamas propaganda, which is completely unapologetic, unable to reform itself. And the BBC now has to be investigated externally. There has to be an external inquiry into the BBC, and until that has concluded and the BBC's institutional anti-Semitism problem is dealt with, I think the BBC should no longer be the recipient of taxpayers' money.
And I think an awful lot of people listening to this show and watching this show would absolutely agree. Gideon, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Gideon Falter, Chief Executive of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Tomorrow, of course, the second anniversary of October the 7th, 2023. And already we're hearing that there are going to be loads of marches planned. Hate marches, some people will call them. I think I would probably call them that. Shabana Mahmood will be in a position to ban them. She says she wants to give police new powers to stop them. Will she, though? That's a big question. 0344 499 1000. Paul says, Mike, I'm ashamed to say, but I think that our Prime Minister is so weak in position and morals that he is incapable of doing the right thing, even when his family are part of the faith being targeted. Truly Shakespearean and truly tragic. Well, we're going to talk now to Ian Duncan-Smith, MP, former Conservative Party leader, who's live in Manchester at the conference, of course, up there, because a big story this morning on the front pages of just both the Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph, all about the Prime Minister's security chief, Jonathan Powell, facing calls to appear before Parliament to explain why charges were dropped against two British men accused of passing spy secrets to Beijing. The allegation basically is that Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the Commons Speaker, says it's wrong to give green lights to hostile states, and he says he's considering bringing a private prosecution against the men. It's all about whether we can call China an enemy in court. Ian Duncan-Smith, who's previously been sanctioned, of course, by the Chinese regime. Very good morning to you, Ian. It's an appalling breach of protocol, this story, isn't it, apart from anything else, and possibly the law.
Well, it shows to what extent this government is trying to manipulate everything so that they can get some kind of trade arrangement with China. They're prepared to give them this ludicrous, huge embassy with an extra 200 spies in it.
Yeah.
And they were told, obviously, when Jonathan Powell went over to China, that has to go ahead if they want a trade arrangement, even though most people oppose it. And secondly, they were obviously told, drop the prosecutions because they will be embarrassing. So they come back and they decide they've got to stop the prosecution, which is already, by this way, building to the moment when they're going to take it to court. And at the last moment, the CPS drop it. And we now know, I'm pretty certain, that the government says CPS took the decision. They did, which is rightly what they do. But the reason is because the government itself failed to define China as a threat or an enemy, which was critical to the old national security legislation, was that you could only leak to an enemy if you're a spy and you're going to be prosecuted. So that failure meant the CPS had nowhere to go with it. They had to kill it.
Right. And Chris Philp, your colleague and Shadow Home Secretary, says that it's inconceivable that Mr. Powell acted without Sir Keir Starmer's sign-off. What do you make of that?
Well, of course, he doesn't act alone. He's a servant in the sense that he is a civil servant, and he advises the government, but the governments make the decisions. And I have heard that they only went and asked the Foreign Office for the statement, but they should have asked the Home Secretary, the Home Office, because they would have defined them almost certainly as a threat. And it's how you carefully place the idea in the heads of the CPS. And of course this was manipulating the case. I saw all the security services long before this case, and they told me in absolute terms that they had these two banged to rights and that they knew that they would get the prosecution. So it appears at the end the only thing outstanding was, did they fit within the national security law as it existed? It's now been changed, which meant that you could only be prosecuted for spying if you leaked to an enemy or to a threat, a nation that's a threat to you, and they failed to say that.
Yeah, and this comes down to Mr. Pell's deputy, a guy called Matt Collins, who we're told was not prepared to call China an enemy in court. But it also raises the question about the case itself, because surely the matters arising from the case should be heard in a court of law, because we kind of deserve to know exactly what this is all about, don't we?
Yeah, completely. I mean, it should have been out there. They should have been prosecuted, and the case should have been heard by the public. The reality is China is a distinct, probably the greatest threat that we face now. And they are organizing all the other totalitarian states as well, like Russia, North Korea, and Iran. And they're working, as you saw maybe a month and a half ago, they had this big meeting in Beijing, and President Xi talked about a new world order, basically bringing down the world order of the West, which was about, democracy, freedom, human rights, the rule of law. They want to bring that down and impose on the rest of the world, eventually, their form of government, which is totalitarian, in which they carry out slave labor, genocide. You get executed at the drop of a hat if you don't agree with the government. All that is what they want to replace what we have now, and that is a threat.
Yeah, and it also calls into question another case where it could well be that the government, in one way, shape or form, whether it was Keir Starmer, whether it was Jonathan Powell, whoever it was, have lent on the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, which Keir Starmer used to run, to act in a particular manner, which again is something that Downing Street continually denies doing, but this is more evidence that surely that's exactly what they're doing.
Well, what they did certainly really what they actually did was realise that the CPS would have to kill the case if the target of this, China, was not defined as an enemy. And you'll notice actually a few months ago they came out under the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme. You have an upper tier, and countries in the upper tier are defined as threats. So what do? They put Russia, North Korea and Iran in the upper tier, but failed to put China in the upper tier, and they referred to China not as a threat but as a challenge. This is all semantics, it's all words. The government is in Project Kowtow to China, on bended knee for almost anything, and all we'll get is a lot of dumping of electric cars, cheap batteries, solar arrays made by slave labour. That's what China wants to do to us as a market. They're not interested in investing in the UK, and we are sort of going towards this like sleepwalkers, led by a government that has got no courage and no sense of what is reality. Reality is China is a major threat to the way that we live our lives, and I think into the future peace of the world.
Yeah. But this is a government by semantics, though, isn't it? Because they come up with phrases and they come up with names for things which are clearly not actually accurate. Like, for example, the one-in, one-out scheme, which they keep calling it a one-in, one-out scheme, which is clearly not one-in, one-out.
Yes.
You know, they've sent 10 people back and they've had about 10,000 people come in. You know, they keep giving things names as though people are stupid.
Well, that's exactly the point. You know, do as I say, not as I do. And that's the reality for this government. You know, they promise all the things that they're going to do, and then when they don't achieve it, they try and weave a web of words around it to say, well, actually, we did achieve it, you just didn't know it. And this is exactly the same, you know, with migration. They said, we're going to smash the gangs. Well, how's that going after over a year now? They're not getting very close to it, and the answer is because it doesn't work. The only thing that will work with migration is to do what Kemi's talking about right now, which is to get out of the Convention of Human Rights, sort out and leave all those ridiculous agreements we have in the UN about the rights of the child and the whole thing about the conventions to do with torture, etc. We need to set our laws here in the UK, and we need judges to obey what Parliament says. And the point about this is Parliament's sovereign, so we should now be able to do this. And then what we say, if you land illegally here, then you're going to another place, and we're going to send you away. It's as simple as that. Therefore, it's not worth you paying huge sums of money or taking the risk. And that would stop the boats coming over. And we have to get that done, but this government's not going to do it.
No, they really aren't. Tory party conference for you, Sir Ian. I don't know if you want to tell us how many you've been to, but there can't be one that you've been to which is slightly less optimistic, perhaps, than this one.
Well, it's a difficult time, let's be honest about it. We were in government, things went wrong in the last few years. COVID didn't help, and nor did the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. All of these things added to the woes meant you borrowed more and spent more, and therefore you have to get it down. So these were difficulties, but also there were things that we could have done which we didn't act on, and we weren't bold, and one of these was obviously to do with migration, and I think it's the issue around migration which has hurt us the most, and it's coming to terms with that right now. We've got a long way to go, but we have to rebuild to get the respect of the British public again, to get them to listen to us. It's not going to happen overnight. Some of my colleagues think there's some kind of messiah in the wings. There's no messiah. It's called hard work, honesty, and a determination to learn from the mistakes that we made and let the public understand that. And so to that degree, that's what this conference is the start of, really, a fight back. I think that all those on the right eventually need to come back together, but the Conservative Party is, of course, the key party in all of that, and St. Kemi's so far done a very good job, and she's building and she's learning too. We need to make sure we get behind her.
Yeah, she talks about rebuilding from where she started, but a lot of people criticise her for not going fast enough. Do you think that's fair?
Well, you can rush at stuff if you want when you arrive, and if you know exactly where you're going and you know what the problem is and how to solve it. But you know, I think people have got fed up with this government and with previous governments where you say something but you don't deliver it. So what she chose to do, I thought quite rightly, and I talked to her about this before, was that when it comes to sorting out migration and the illegals and the boats, you have to have a sound policy that tells the public that you know how it can be done, and that policy will work, and that on day one you would introduce all of the requirements to get it done. Unlike this government, which has basically been meandering around for over a year. And so this conference yesterday, we had what is a very detailed plan as how you leave the Court of Human Rights, the Convention of Human Rights, and what you would also have to deal with, such as some of those UN conventions, Refugee Convention, etc. That's now detailed, black and white, and now giving strength to that is to say, right, we know what we're going to do this, this is our pledge, we're moving on. Next thing, we need to deal with the huge hidden taxes of net zero, which he's going to be talking about, and the ridiculous nature of the fast race to get to this arbitrary date when we are one of the least polluting countries already in the world. But this government is charging everybody huge extra hidden sums of money, which is like an extra load of tax, which is why the economy hasn't been doing so well, because of the huge costs on dashing to this net zero nonsense, which we can get to in good time and reasonably well, but making sure that technology leads the way. And the trouble is right now we've got people who shouldn't be trusted with anything, like Mr. Miliband in charge of that subject.
Yes, that is a bit worrying. Let me just ask you finally about this protest conversation that's going on. Shabana Mahmood says she wants to crack down on protests which are repetitive, which take place in the same location time after time. There are some who say that's good because that means that these pro-Palestinian protests will come to an end because they've been going for 2 years now, every single weekend. Fine, fair enough. But what if that extends suddenly to all sorts of protests and the whole question of free speech and whether maybe some protests that you don't agree with are still allowed to go ahead, or whether they will be banned by this government?
Well, it depends what she comes forward with, but the one bit I think has been the problem in all of this is that the right to protest has become actually also quite malignant, and a lot of these protests now are quite threatening in the sense that their continuous protesting has created a real problem. We've seen the rise of anti-Semitism in the United Kingdom, and we saw these terrible attacks 2 days ago and the murders. All of this is connected, and so I think the bit that needs adjusting in the right to protest is that repetitive, constant, long-standing protests in the same area can be very, very damaging to people's worries and concerns and the sense that they're being put upon totally. So you can make your protest, you have a right to do that, do it peacefully, but doing it again and again and again in the same location is in fact a reasonable and viable issue to look at. The second bit of it, of course, is practical. You know, the police, I'm an Outer London MP, and I have to tell you, every time these protests take place, you know, all the Outer London boroughs get stripped of their police and they're taken down into central London. It's hard enough to try and get the police to focus on things like antisocial behaviour and shoplifting, which now, by the way, is not simple, but it is very violent, and they steal huge amounts and they threaten people on the high streets, gang warfare, etc. All of this needs our police in post doing their jobs, arresting people and getting them off the streets. But if we keep on getting them sucked down into central London on a very regular basis, it makes it very difficult for the police to do what they're supposed to do. So that has to be in the equation as well. How much does this put extra strains on the police in trying to keep the peace and also get after criminals? And for those of my constituents and many others living in outer London, many's the time they're saying, where are our police? And quite often they're down in central London trying to keep the peace down there. And I think it's important for us to get a balance in this. So in a way, if she's touching on that, then I would be supportive of it. Obviously not shutting down on free speech, but just getting this in perspective and the scale of it.
Yeah. Ian Duncan-Smith, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, thank you very much indeed. Former Conservative Party leader, live from Manchester, Conservative Party conference, of course, going up there. Let's get a quick voice note from Elle on Palestinian protests.
Morning, Mike. It's Elle, your most devoted listener. On Palestine, I went last Christmas to a family Christmas over relatives with both my daughters, my son-in-law, my granddaughter. Family Christmas, went to church. Don't normally go to church, but you participate, don't you? Had a lovely day, got a taxi home, and the minute that my son-in-law, daughter and granddaughter got out the car, the taxi driver interjected into my conversation with my daughter, uninvited, asked me what I thought of Palestine and the Jewish situation, to which I said, I think it's none of our business. We should keep out of it. He went absolutely mad. And when I say mad, he scared the life out of us. Me and my daughter were terrified. I got him to drop me a couple of streets away, gave him extra money just to get rid of him. Honestly, I'm scared. I'm scared.
Interesting perspective on things. Elle there, thank you very much indeed. This from Linda in Walmer. She says, Gary Neville's a total moron. Do white middle-aged men riot, set off bombs on tube trains and arenas, attack innocents with knives and acid, drive vehicles into Christmas markets, slaughter small girls at a dance class, run rape gangs, live off benefits, total big mouth ex-footballer. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This is Talk.
This is not, in no way this is about people of the UK having a problem with Jewish people. That has gone, it is a perfect example of an integrated community.
Yeah.
Exactly, as much as we joked about that before. This is different. The anti-Semitism coming from elsewhere, isn't it? It is coming from people who may have a religious, fundamentally based on a religious belief, taken to the extreme, that has a problem with Jewish people. And it's on these shores. It's in our country, isn't it? That's what we learn. That's what the Canary is telling us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to very nearly 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here shortly to tell us what's coming up on her show. Rather disturbing story just broken on Sun Online. Shock moment, a migrant takes to the skies to paraglide into Europe over the heavily fortified border. That's nice, isn't it? So apparently all that police found was the abandoned paragliding gear. This happened in Morocco. Basically, there's a Spanish enclave where they take people from North Africa into this place, which is where they sort of process them and then take them into Spain. This guy decided there's a huge fence which protects this place called Quetta, which is a Spanish enclave in North Africa. And there's a picture, there's footage, you might see it later on the show, later on the day, of a guy just paragliding over it. Do you remember the paragliders on October the 7th? So that's all we need now. Then we'll start coming over the channel in paragliders, which I'm sure they could do. Julie Hartley-Brewer's here.
Brilliant. I mean, great start to Monday morning.
I know.
There was lorries, there was boats,
Right.
and it's paragliders.
No, it's
Brilliant.
paragliders, you know.
I mean, seriously, I can't even get over. Genuinely, I had to be stopped by my husband from going to join one of these marches and things over the weekend, glorifying October the 7th, glorifying. That's what they were doing.
Of course
the
they
Manchester
were.
Synagogue
Celebrating.
attack. So they really were. No one was shouting for Hamas to agree to a peace deal or ending anti-Semitism on our streets.